Hello, this is a guy who likes fanfiction and is too lazy to read, so here is Flame, Ash, time in audio form. Check the description for the links to the author. Chapter 41, Tower of the Knights. Aelfric. Lonato yells as he slams his fist against a metal door. Come out from that blasted laboratory. The enemy draws upon our territory as we speak. The door slides open and out walks Aelfric. For a brief moment, Lonato catches a faint glimpse of a green-blue hue of light softly reflecting off a wall behind the mysterious fanatic. The monk politely bows, "My apologies, sir. This will be a decisive battle, thus I wished to check in on someone dearly important to me." "Humph. Never mind that now," Lonato scowls. "I need you to help organize my men. The knights greatly appreciate your zealotry. They'll need it if they wish to overcome our opponents. I am here for you all, as always, sir," Aelfric bows. "Very good," Lonato bows. "It will also fall to you to judge the prisoners once the battle is concluded." "But, sir," Aelfric bows his head slightly in admonishment, "the goddess has already judged them, has she not? We must leave no prisoners to begin with. After all, these reviled sinners did not spare your son. Nor have they spared the children of the goddess." "Right, of course," Lonato falters and nods. Aelfric continues, "Sad as it is, we must purge this world of all their filth. Only in Aelel will they be cleansed by the goddess' holy wrath. Sir, have I not taught you that it is our divine responsibility to begin the goddess' punishment to this world by sending them unto her arms? Is that not why we founded the Knights of Syros?" "Correct you are, father," Lonato relents. "Hopefully, our enemies will acknowledge it as a mercy that they may die quickly on their feet. That is the highest mercy for which sinners such as them may ask," Aelfric sighs. "Lonato." Ash's voice rings out. He and Annette approach the old man in a hurry. "Calm yourself, son. What is it? Are they upon us?" "Nearly so," Ash nods. "It will only be an hour or so until they arrive." Annette interjects, "Where do you want us, Mr. Gaspard?" "There it is," Seath grimly states, peering out of the transport. "Gaspard Tower. Home of the Knights of Syros." The tower is barely visible through the nighttime haze surrounding the area, leaving only a monolithic shadow against the mist. Flame bows her head and clasps her hands. "To think that we'd end up here, after all this time." Seath looks to his daughter, "Flame, when the battle begins, you must stay in the rear where it is safest." "But, father, Actually," Edelgard interrupts. "I'll need you both in the rear. You are among the last of your kind, and I do not wish to needlessly endanger you. I only agreed to let you come in the first place since you were so insistent on getting closure." "Are you certain?" Seath asks. "Yes," she nods. "I have more than enough manpower to break through the tower's defenses as it is." "I suppose that's true." He hesitantly glances towards the hooded figure in dark armor. "And who might you be?" Flame cautiously asks the figure. "The Ashen Empress," the woman's synthesized voice responds. "Well," Seath retorts, "you had better not be planning anything sinister towards Flame." Edelgard sighs, "This is Byleth, my historian. She's a hybrid between a human and one of your people. She possesses immense power which will surely make our victory certain." "A hybrid between our races?" Flame asks. "I didn't know such a being existed. But that name Byleth?" "We both have a history with the Knights," the Empress responds. "I will make certain that they can't hurt anyone else after tonight." Seath furrows his brow, "As long as you are after the same enemy, I suppose that will have to be good enough for me." "Oh!" Flame exclaims. "I do hope you will tell us more about yourself once this is over. I must say, something about you feels awfully familiar." Edelgard exchanges a knowing glance with the Empress before stating, "We can sort that out later, regardless. Remember our plan, and do not take unnecessary risks." The Blade Breakers and the Black Eagles tear through the initial wave of defense. Bodies of knights fall into the fady fog. Geralt swings down on a soldier with his massive weapon. The knight's body crushes against the ground as he turns to Edelgard. "All right, kid. Their outer forces are almost done. What's your plan on getting through the gates?" "The Empress can get us through easily enough," Edelgard answers. But we need to be careful. Their strongest defenses likely still lay inside. Geralt shrugs. I suppose they wouldn't want to waste too many mooks in the mist. Too easy for friendly fire. Edelgard comes upon a trio of knights huddling in the fog. One of them screams and charges for her, to which she easily cuts them down. The other two hesitate, then attack her head-on, weapons drawn. A burst of sparkling magic flings the pair of knights in separate directions. Edelgard turns to her flank to see Mercedes. "Mercedes," she shouts. "What are you doing all the way up here? Shouldn't you be in the back?" The doctor smiles back. "We're practically done out here. I wanted to make sure you were doing all right." "I feel I should be more concerned about you," Edelgard frowns. "Don't worry, I know a bit of magic now, and I don't intend to fight on the front lines." "I see that," Edelgard huffs. "How did you even learn magic that fast, anyway?" "Byleth says I'm a natural at faith magic," Mercedes grins. "I already know heal and Nosferatu. I figured our brave soldiers could use a bit more healing magic to help them out." "Well then, thank you for your efforts. Just please don't overdo it," Edelgard scrunches her brow. "I won't," Mercedes agrees. The pair meet up with Geralt as their forces gather around them. Edelgard stands tall and asserts, "Now, we simply have to knock." They march to the massive, reinforced entrance doors, stepping over the bodies of knights. The mist thickens around the tower, obstructing their view of the entrance. "How the hell is the mist growing this heavy?" Edelgard questions. Mercedes stammers, "I think it's magic. I can't be certain, since I'm so new at this, but I feel like I'm sensing something in the air." "Which means they're clouding our field of view for a reason," Edelgard notes. As they warily march closer to the doors, Edelgard stops them. She hears some machines whirring and clanking. Then her eyes widen as she shouts, "Take cover." Auto turrets stationed around the door unfold and open fire at the head of their forces. Before the rounds can connect with anyone, a dark figure dashes in the way of the weaponry. Sparks and bullets scatter as they ricochet off the Ashen Empress armor. She draws her sword from her side and whips it into the turrets. The metal cleaves and falls as Byleth strikes each battlement. With the last turret taken care of, she strides towards the massive set of doors at the entrance. Reattaching her weapon to her utility belt, the Empress plunges her hands into the seam of the doors. An electrical current shocks through her armor, illuminating the fog. Undeterred, Byleth continues to pry the doors apart. The metal twists as she groans, loosing it from its hinges. Once the doors break away from their intended position, the defensive current fizzes out as the wiring becomes exposed. Byleth then pushes each of the doors out of the way, creating a wide opening for Edelgard's forces to enter the tower. The revolutionaries stand hesitantly in the entryway with the entire first chamber blackened from a lack of power. The Empress wanders ahead, searching for a port or an outlet. She stumbles into a few knights in the process. The revolutionaries watch from afar as the dark entry chamber is briefly lit up by gunfire and vibro weapons clashing against ebony armor for several seconds. Then screaming followed by nothing. Byleth finds a port in the wall and connects a small device to it. She then takes a small USB apparatus from her belt and plugs it into the ported device. "Bear," she says, "you should be good to go." "Alright," Bernadetta acknowledges over comms. "Consider this light switch flipped." The lights to the tower switch on with a loud thwack. Edelgard's forces gaze around at the place. Large ornate pillars hold up the massive arching ceiling. Two-dimensional patterns of the goddess and the saints are carved into the walls, as are figures of medieval knights. "It almost looks like a monastery," Mercedes observes. "Makes sense," Geralt responds. "These guys love their religion. They probably think of themselves as the knights in these carvings, fighting alongside the saints. How repugnant and arrogant," Seath seethes, thinking they deserve to stand amongst the armies of Cyros. "Focus," Edelgard demands. "You can scold the decor after we dispose of the current residents." The revolutionaries move through the chamber. Before long, they stumble upon a doorway leading to a vast system of stairs leading up through the tower. Doors on every level open up, and knights flood into the stairwell. "I'll take care of this," the Ashen Empress huffs. She springs onto the second-story stairs, whipping through the initial squad of knights. Then she does the same for every preceding level, shrugging off various attacks. Some of the revolutionaries gasp and cover themselves as body parts, viscera, and steaming blood spill down the stairwell. The knights curse Byleth as a demon as they futilely fight back against her. Eventually, the Empress comes to a stop at the halfway point of the tower. Each staircase leads to one singular floor. Specifically, they filter out to a wide balcony connected to a massive blast door. Over comms, Byleth contacts Edelgard, "You can come up now. There's a large chamber here. We'll all have to go through it to continue." Edelgard sighs, which means it's likely a kill box designed to thin out our forces. "We'll be up in a few minutes. Don't go too far ahead." Edelgard leaves a detachment of revolutionaries at the ground floor. The rest march up the stairs. They avoid stepping in blood as best as they're able, but to no avail. Mercedes grimaces as she avoids looking at the scattered body parts. "I knew war would be violent," the doctor bemoans. "But I didn't think it would be this grotesque." "Mercedes," Edelgard reassures, "if this is too much, you can feel free to hang back with Seath and Flayn." "No," the doctor shakes her head. "I promised I wouldn't fight on the front lines, but I won't avoid this fight either. I'm going to be behind you the whole way." Leonie eagerly interrupts, "I like your spirit. You know, merci, for someone so soft-spoken, you're surprisingly resolute." "Thank you," Mercedes nods, "but I'm mostly doing this because I feel I owe it to the goddess. It must sadden her greatly to see these people abuse her name for such wanton violence." "Whatever floats your boat," Leonie says. Eloise cheers, "Don't let Leonie deter you, Mercedes. I think you're fighting for a wonderful reason. Why, I dare say you're on the stairway to heaven with such a righteous motivation." "Kin it with the puns, Eloise," Gerald scolds. "Just trying to lighten the mood, Captain." After a few more minutes of trotting up the stairs, the revolutionaries reunite with the Ashen Empress at the top. Everyone stops for a breath while Edelgard, Mercedes, and Gerald meet up with the Empress. "By the goddess," Mercedes rubs her ankles. "Just walking up those stairs was half the battle." Edelgard looks to Byleth, "Great work, keeping casualties down. I'm also relieved that you turned the knight's bottleneck against them." Gerald nods, "Yeah, you know, maybe Edelgard was right. Maybe I had you figured wrong. Despite all those stories about you, you seem pretty unhostile. You know, if we ignore all the diced-up bodies." The Empress stares at him, "Gerald, Yeah, what? I never wanted to scare anyone. And I don't want to hurt any of you." Gerald gawks, Thanks, I guess. Anyway, I suppose we should get moving. My people must be growing soft if a quick skirmish and some steps do them in." The old mercenary turns and barks out orders to his troop. Edelgard can't help a half smile as she puts her hand on Byleth's shoulder. "Come," she says. "Open those doors, and let us take the rest of the tower in the name of our new world." The Ashen Empress nods as she approaches the blast doors. The revolutionaries form up around her with Edelgard by her side. The Empress grabs the doors and begins to wrench them apart, much like the ones at the entrance. Before them lies another dark chamber. "Bear," Edelgard calls, "we have another area that needs some light." "On it," Bernadetta responds. A second later, the lights switch on. The revolutionaries find themselves across from a floor-wide training room, filled with a vast legion of knights. At their head, Ash and Annette stand. Ash holds a high-caliber rifle which he steadily points at the revolutionaries. The young woman holds a large hammer-like weapon of bone. One end flattens out as the other spreads out, then curls in with a massive series of horn-like spikes. This weapon then flares to life in the woman's arms, sending an orange glow throughout the training area. "In the name of the goddess," Annette barks, "we command you to surrender. Otherwise, you have to face the might of both the knights and one of the goddess' divine relics." Chapter 42, A History Between Foes. "Annie!" Mercedes shouts. The war cleric reciprocates her shock, "Merci. What are you doing with these people?" "I should be asking you the same thing," the doctor frowns. "Annie, the Knights of Syros are terrible people. You shouldn't be with them." "Coming from you. Annette glowers. You're with a group that's doing the same thing. Annette, Edelgard calls. I never expected to see you in a place like this. We may both fight the Empire, but we are not the same. These knights are fully willing to target and kill civilians. We have never and will never strike at innocents. Only the corrupt rulers of this world. Hold on. Ash interrupts. Annette, how do you know these people? The war cleric slumps. I went to uni with Mercedes and Edelgard. Then Merci and I went to the Ferdinand Institute of Medicine together. Edelgard and I only had a couple classes together, but Merci was like my sister. Annette glares at Mercedes. Why? Why would you join Edelgard? Why would you do this? Annie, please, the doctor begs. You know Edelgard and I basically raised each other. I would never hurt her. And yet you'll hurt me. I don't want to hurt anyone. Mercedes pleads. There's no reason for us to fight, Annie. We both want to stop the Empire. You can't listen to them, Annette, Ash counters. They'll say anything to weaken your resolve. Annette looks a bit shaken at Mercedes' words. Then she retorts, Mr. Gaspard and my father said that Fodlan was full of sinners. That it's our responsibility to punish them in the name of the goddess. Merci, she swallows a lump in her throat, I never thought you'd be one of those sinners. You were always so faithful. I am faithful? Mercedes cries. Do you really think that the goddess would want you to indiscriminately kill the very people she herself created? Especially when they've had no chance to learn of the Empire's lies. Aye. Ash shouts, they're just trying to confuse you. You can't let yourself waver. Enough of this, Edelgard asserts. Annette, we have no desire to hurt you, but we will destroy the Knights of Syros. They are a threat to all of Fodlan, and we must stop them. I ask you, both as a former classmate and as an enemy general, stand aside. I have no intention of sacrificing you, but we cannot stop if you choose to stand in our way. A threat to all of Fodlan. Ash roars. We're trying to save Fodlan. Edelgard responds, and how many innocents must you intentionally slaughter before you've saved them? You cannot force faith onto people, and you cannot kill them if they don't abide by that faith. Says you. You've started a war to force your own ideals onto Fodlan. A deep, synthesized voice interjects. This is getting us nowhere, the Ashen Empress states. Edelgard, I know both of them from the other world. I'll talk to them, you focus on defeating the Knights. Very well, Edelgard nods. But please, do not waste too much time trying to talk them out of it. We don't know how deep the Knights' indoctrination goes. You might not be able to save them. I won't give up on my students, the Empress answers. Byleth rushes forward. Surprised, Annette swings Crusher at the Empress. The dark figure ducks under the blow and sprints just past the war cleric. Her arm slinks around the young woman as she lifts her off the ground. Hey! What are you? The Ashen Empress then dashes towards Ash. The boy struggles to get a proper aim on his moving target as she holds Annette. In a second, she appears just before him. He attempts to dodge her grip, but her other arm wraps around him, nevertheless. Once Byleth has both of them in her grasp, she speeds out of the room and bounds a few staircases down about 2 stories. She drops them both out of her grip onto a level walkway. Why you? Ash stutters. I've heard of you. You're the Ashen Demon. Well, I'm not afraid of you. Yes, you are, the Empress says. But I don't want you to be. Annette grips Crusher closely, what do you want with us? The Empress answers, I want you to live. The people you're following are taking you down a dark route. I know you think you're serving the goddess, but you're not. Knowing her, she would be very cross with you if she saw what you're doing. Ash scowls, knowing her? If she saw? How can you possibly speak about her so casually? The Ashen Empress pauses. Then she removes her helmet and hood. Their eyes widen as Annette whispers to Ash, she looks just like Aelfrix. Yeah, I know, he whispers back. Annette. Ash, Byleth calmly speaks. I know what your fathers have likely told you. I know Gustav wasn't the best father. I'm guessing he disappeared for a time after the tragedy of Dusker. Annette glares, how could you? And I know that Lonato is almost certainly consumed with vengeance over what happened to Kristoff. Ash yells, what would you possibly know about Kristoff? Through the power of Suthies. The real power of Suthies. Ash, your father is rightfully upset with the Empire, but he's taking his aggression out in the wrong ways. You have to remember, vengeance is hurting people who hurt you. Justice is stopping them from hurting anyone else. Vengeance is selfish, but justice is selfless. Weren't you taught that the goddess wants you to be selfless? Ash quivers, I can't just abandon them. I have a family to protect. Ash, Byleth nods, I know about your siblings. No matter if you decide to fight me or not, I promise you no harm will befall them. I will protect them. If Lonato is willing to surrender peacefully, I will protect him, too. Annette screams, and what about my father? Did your people have to kill him? Annette, the Empire killed your father. In fact, the one responsible also killed someone a friend of mine treasured. But I don't wish revenge on them. I just want to stop the Empire as quickly as possible, so as few people are hurt as possible. The war cleric trembles, unsure of what to say. Likewise, Ash stands, considering Byleth's words. Thus, the Empress continues, killing others won't ever make you feel better about Kristoff or Gustav. It won't make the hurt you feel go away. But if you help us stop the Empire, without targeting civilians, you'll at least have a sense of closure when this is all finished. You can stand proud, knowing you made the world a better place so that no one would ever be lost to the Empire again. Ash balls his fists, I can't just turn on Lonato. He raised me. Then don't, Byleth gently places her hands on his shoulders. We can handle the rest from here. We have a detachment who's secured the bottom of the tower. You can meet up with them until the battle's done. 2 of them are saints who once knew the goddess in ancient days. Annette asks, you mean Sethline and Sikal? The knights have been pursing them for years. If they sided with you then. Goddess, this is all so much. Please, Byleth softly pleads. The goddess isn't on the knight's side, and I don't want to see either of you hurt. Annette and Ash exchange looks. Annette speaks up, will you walk with us? Till we meet up with your allies, I mean. I don't want them to attack us on sight. Byleth smiles, of course. Though, I encourage you to walk quickly so I can help end the battle as soon as possible. And close your eyes, the sight on the way down is not one you should have to endure. The revolutionaries press against the Knights of Syros. Without leadership or the power of a relic, this legion of knights has already dwindled down to half size. Bodies litter the box-like chamber, both sides struggle not to trip over the corpses as they strike at each other. Edelgard brings her axe down on an opponent. Several knights attempt to flank her, but she 180s too sharply for them. Her axe swipes through their heads and necks, spraying blood against the floor. She turns to Geralt, this environment is too cluttered. We have to end this quickly before they decided to send in reinforcements. Yeah. Geralt shouts back. If I could press a win button, I would. We'll just have to tough it out. The mercenary swings his massive sword-lance hybrid through a cluster of knights. Another small squad of 4 approaches him, and he sighs. If you didn't want this to turn into a massacre, he chides, you shouldn't have trapped us all in here. One of the knights replies, we'll sacrifice as many people as it takes to whittle you down before you face the Lord of Knights. Geralt shrugs, admirable spirit, but a horrible strategy. We're not as dumb as you might think, barks a knight. As they speak, the floor starts shifting. Platforms raise and lower, mimicking mountainous terrain. Bodies slips between the platforms as troops from both sides stumble. Though, the revolutionaries take longer to adapt as the knights' training quickly kicks in. They use this opening to start picking off some revolutionaries. Geralt and the squad he faces rise up with one of the highest platforms. Clever, Geralt huffs, but leave it to the knights to play dirty. Captain! Alois shouts from below. Alois, the mercenary shouts back. Someone has to control this from a settings room. Tell Edelgard. Find the entrance to that room. Right, Captain, the man obeys and runs off. Now then, Geralt grins at his enemies, back to you. He charges directly at the squad of knights. With a swing of his weapon, 2 of them fly off the ledge. One rolls under the weapon and attempts to jab a vibro sword into his ribcage. Geralt grabs the knight's wrists with his free hand, stopping the attack. The knight attempts to wriggle free as the remaining enemy rushes the mercenary with a vibro axe. Geralt sighs and chucks the knight he's holding into their comrade. As they struggle to their feet, Geralt brings his weapon down on one of them. The other scrambles, sprinting towards the ledge and jumping to the nearest platform below them. Geralt taunts as he jumps down after his opponent, "I thought the knights weren't supposed to run." Meanwhile, Byleth re-enters the training chamber, joining the battle. She sees Eloise speaking with Edelgard and meets up with them. What's going on? Byleth. Edelgard greets. Eloise was just telling me to find some sort of settings room. Eloise nods, it was the captain's suggestion. Wait, you don't have your spooky mask. You look like. Byleth answers, focus, Eloise. Where's Geralt? The man points to a set of high platforms. Byleth watches as Geralt jumps from each level, cleaving his way through knights. Below him, she sees Leonie clearing out the floor-level enemies. All right, Byleth nods. I'll find the settings room. All right, Citrai, Eloise says in a daze. What? I mean Ashen Demon Empress, person, Eloise shakes his head. She runs off as the rest of their forces continue fighting. Geralt picks off small groups of knights, isolated by their platforms. Once he's closer to the floor, he hears Leonie beckon him, Captain. I'm clearing you a path. Worry about yourself, kid, he calls back. Nearing the bottom, he confronts a band of knights attempting to climb down to escape him. They turn to him in a panic, readying their weapons. One charges directly at him, against the advice of her peers. Geralt swings his blade to the side, splitting the attacker in 2. The others step backwards as they prepare a defensive formation. Geralt approaches them and strikes. Suddenly, the platforms lower. The unexpected movement makes him stumble. 2 more knights attempt to seize the opportunity and spring towards Geralt with their weapons. He recovers in time to deflect their attack, sending them backwards with a clang. However, their downward strike leaves him off balance while the platform finishes retracting back into the floor. The other knights flank around him and rush him from all directions. He arcs his blade in a circle, slashing 3 of the knights. 2 of them dive under his attack, sliding on the floor. Geralt manages to kick one in the head, nearly crushing his whole face in from his unnatural strength. The other still manages to pierce his sword through the mercenary's thigh. Geralt! Leonie shouts as she attempts to rush towards him but is blocked by the squad of knights fighting her. Geralt seethes as he grabs the knight by the throat and tosses him several yards away. Then the 2 knights he deflected earlier again lunge towards him. Geralt prepares a protective stance, but he stumbles from the wound in his leg. He manages to repel one of the knight's attacks, but the other punctures a vibro lance through his shoulder. Geralt grabs the lance and attempts to pull it out. The first knight then coils back to her feet and again dashes towards the mercenary, sword in hand. Geralt readies his great sword for a counter, but she instead throws her sword at him. He swipes his blade to block the attack, and she jumps forward as he does so, kicking him in the face. Once he again stumbles, the knight with the lance pulls a knife from their belt and jabs it into Geralt's chest. The old mercenary grunts as he falls to the ground, letting out a great thud. No! Leonie screams as she cuts through her enemies in a fit of rage. The orange-haired mercenary sprints towards Geralt's 2 remaining attackers, screaming. One of the knights recovers her sword and slashes for Leonie. The merc simply swats the sword away with her lance and impales the knight. Leonie then throws her body towards her comrade who stumbles away. I'll fucking kill you! Leonie shrieks as she races towards the last knight. Through sheer adrenaline, Leonie jumps forward, kneeing the knight in the jaw. With a loud crack, her opponent's neck twists as they slump to the ground. She next turns to Geralt and runs up to his body. Tears she can't control stream down her cheeks as she drops to her knees next to him. Suddenly, the platforms lower. The unexpected movement makes him stumble. Two more knights attempt to seize the opportunity and spring towards Geralt with their weapons. He recovers in time to deflect their attack, sending them backwards with a clang. However, their downward strike leaves him off balance while the platform finishes retracting back into the floor. The other knights flank around him and rush him from all directions. He arcs his blade in a circle, slashing 3 of the knights. 2 of them dive under his attack, sliding on the floor. Geralt manages to kick one in the head, nearly crushing his whole face in from his unnatural strength. The other still manages to pierce his sword through the mercenary's thigh. Geralt! Leonie shouts as she attempts to rush towards him but is blocked by the squad of knights fighting her. Geralt seethes as he grabs the knight by the collar and tosses him several yards away. Then the 2 knights he deflected earlier again lunge towards him. Geralt prepares a protective stance, but he stumbles from the wound in his leg. Lady at Midnight whips through one of them, clashing against the other's vibro sword. The Ashen Empress then descends from high in the air, denting the floor as she lands. The final knight scrambles to her feet as the Empress approaches. Byleth's vision reddens as her ears ring. The knight grabs her sword and swings it against the Empress' armor to no avail. Byleth picks her up by the throat, lifting her off the ground. The knight sputters and kicks futilely. Byleth steadies her breathing as she unblinkingly stares into her enemy's eyes. Then she drops the knight. Your forces are routed. Suthies isn't saving you. Leave this place. The knight crawls back on her feet and sprints away in a hurry. Byleth walks towards Geralt and kneels by his leg. With a flash of golden runes, she heals his wound after removing the sword. Thanks, he says. So you're the Empress? You're Edelgard's historian. Byleth doesn't respond, keeping her jaw clenched nearly every bit the mercenary she used to be. Are you okay? He asks. She still doesn't respond, mumbling, I don't know how I managed to do that again. Geralt snaps his fingers in front of her and she turns to him, as though she's coming out of a fog. What are you talking about? Do what again? Once more, she doesn't answer. Your name's Byleth, you look just like Citrai, and you have all these powers, he says. Where do you come from? I can't say right now. Leonie rushes up. Captain, the battle's almost over. She turns to Byleth. Thank you for saving the captain, Miss Demon. I gotta say, you look a lot younger than I thought you would. Byleth stands. I suppose that's because I don't age. She walks away to rejoin Edelgard. Leonie and Geralt exchange looks. What was that about? Leonie asks. Geralt sighs, Goddess, even when you think you've seen the everything, life still has a way of surprising you. I'm not following, Leonie frowns. The old mercenary shakes his head, I think my life just got a whole lot more complicated. Chapter 43, Return to Me. Unlike the lower section, the upper half of Gaspard Tower falls more in line with a standard structure. Rather than a series of stairs, each floor opens out into hallways lined with locked doors. The revolutionaries quickly realize that many of these rooms house various unarmed castle staff, faithful civilians, and even groups of orphans. I never expected this, Leonie grimaces. Edelgard nods, we'll have to organize living arrangements for these people once the battle is concluded. As their forces progress up through the tower, they mentally ready themselves for the final assault. They know full well that the lack of resistance means that Lonato is consolidating the rest of his forces in whatever chamber he's holed himself. They draw near the top only 2 floors before the summit, and they stumble upon the entrance to a laboratory. Geralt sighs, I hate to ruin our rhythm, but we should probably explore this in case it has something they can use against us. I concur, Edelgard says. However, she turns to Byleth and Geralt, I need the rest of you to continue upward and press the assault. I'll take a small detachment to deal with this. Are you sure? Byleth asks. Yes. To be blunt, the both of you have a lot of history with the knights. Whatever experiments they have in there might interfere with your states of mind, which we need in the coming battle. I promise, whatever I find, I'll discuss it with you afterward. Geralt shrugs, fine, you're the boss. But we'll be back to check this place out when we're done. Of course, Edelgard agrees. Byleth, the Blade Breakers, and the majority of the Black Eagles split off and head further upwards. Edelgard turns towards the lab and enters her detachment following behind her. They wander through the lab, confused by the eerie green-blue hue of light subtly reflecting off of assorted workstations, computers, and beakers. The lab itself is empty, presumably evacuated before their invasion. Where's this light coming from? Mercedes shivers. I'm not sure, but we'll find it soon enough, Edelgard reassures. She hears Petra murmur a small Brigid prayer before speaking, I hope we destroy the source of this evil soon. I feel I am getting the chill that comes from bad spirits. I believe this place may be having a curse. Mercedes agrees, there's some kind of magic at play here. It feels like faith but distorted. Edelgard shakes her head, compose yourselves. As always, we must be on our guard. They follow a line of desks to a doorway. The sinister light leaks from under the door, and Mercedes swallows hard. Edelgard huffs and tears open the entrance. The small team walks out into what they assume is the main chamber of the lab. The area is hexagonal, spreading out with a diameter of several yards. Various monitors rim the walls, clearly used for the project in the center of the room. Said project is a massive tub full of cyan liquid which emanates the unnerving light. Suspended in the fluid is the murky image of a figure. Edelgard can't make out the details, but she believes the figure to be a woman. She wears a white bodysuit with miscellaneous sensory equipment connected to her, presumably feeding data to the monitors on the walls. Her long blue hair slowly floats in the tank, and she appears to be comatose. Mercedes frowns, something about her feels so sad. Who do you think she is? Petra asks. An excellent question, a gentle voice calls from above them. They look up to see a monk standing on a walkway just above the open top of the tank. Who are you? Edelgard glares. What is this place? The revolutionaries exit from a stairwell onto the final floor. Before them lies a set of double doors similar to the ones at the entrance of the tower. They form up behind Byleth as she pushes against the doors. Once they twist open, the revolutionaries are greeted by the sight of Lonato sitting on a medieval throne in what appears to be a cathedral. The Knights of Syros line up in formation with their weapons at the ready. However, their final defensive organization has far fewer knights than they were expecting, numbering less than 100. The chamber itself is hauntingly religious and old-fashioned. Like the base level, pillars hold up the arched ceiling. Pews are piled near the walls, clearly having been moved by the knights prior to this fight. Byleth sees a mural on the floor she recognizes all too well, a depiction of Suthies is surrounded by the saints in their dragon forms. All of the crests hem around the circumference of the painting, save the crest of flames. Yet, Byleth knows the crest of flames is still present in the painting in the line work itself. The posture of the goddess and the saints secretly conveys the shape of the final crest. The whole mural is itself the symbol of the crest of flames. Lonato stands from his throne. Moonlight halos around him, though the otherwise silver light is tainted lilac from the tall stained glass window behind him. The window is meaninglessly ornate with the crest of Syros prominently adorning the top of the glass. His soldiers shift into an attack stance as he takes to his feet. I, Lonato Gildas Gaspard, am the Lord of Knights, Sir General of the Knights of Syros, he roars. And you trespass on holy grounds. In the name of the goddess, we will smite every last one of you blasphemers. Hold! Byleth cries. Your forces have dwindled. You are in no shape to fight us. Please, surrender. Lonato glowers, I admit, our forces did not anticipate the Ashen Demon to be among our enemy's ranks, but we will not stand down. Even if it's with my dying breath, I will avenge my sons. Ash still lives, Byleth announces. Lonato looks a little shaken at her words, but then he speaks, so you sinners will stoop to telling such cruel lies to weaken us. Please, Lonato, Byleth pleads, I spared Ash and Annette. They're with the rest of our forces, I promised him I would do everything in my power to take you in alive. You're suggesting that my own son defected. Byleth shakes her head, I showed him that the goddess wasn't on your side, and that I have no desire to kill anyone. There are better ways to handle our war with the Empire than recklessly targeting civilians. Enough of your lies. Lonato barks. He points an elaborate vibral lance towards their forces. Men, fell them in the name of the goddess. Geralt sighs and turns to Byleth, well, you tried to talk them down, and that's impressive enough on its own. Byleth frowns, just try to fight them into submission. The revolutionaries clash with the knights in a quick battle. One sweep from Byleth's sword cuts down the initial wave of their oncoming attackers. As the rest of the knights step back for cover, the blade breakers circle around both their flanks, trapping them in a pincer as the Black Eagles push forward. The formation of the knights gets tighter and tighter as enemies cleave through them on all sides. Soon, the knights are reduced to Lonato and a small squad of a dozen of his elite guard backing themselves up against his throne. Lonato, please. Byleth calls one final time. We don't want to kill you. The old knight looks to his last few soldiers as they resolutely shield him. Then he looks over his casualties spread across the floor, blood staining the mural of Suthies. Demon, he calls, have you truly spared Ash and Annette? As well as the rest of your staff and civilians, Byleth answers. Sir, one of his knights questions. Ignoring them, Lonato continues, very well, if you guarantee the lives of my people, my son, and what remains of my men, I will surrender. Sir, another knight shouts. Enough. My decision has been made, Lonato yells in defeat. The knights drop their weapons as Byleth nods, thank you, Lonato. She's so beautiful, isn't she? Aelfric asks. Answer my question, Edelgard demands. Aelfric simply continues, you know, the fluid of the tank has no preservative properties. Even in death, Citri's body remains so, pristine all on its own. For nearly 30 years, her splendor has never worn. Never decomposed. Never degraded. Surely, she's been heaven sent by the goddess herself as one of her kin. You're obsessed with a corpse? Edelgard asks in disgust. Do not mistake me, the intention was to call her soul back into her body. Why else would she not spoil, even after all this time? It is one of the many charges the goddess has asked of me. Edelgard scoffs, you are unwell. Stop this nonsense and come down peacefully. You know, I've loved her since the moment I first laid my eyes upon her. It's a pity I never got to know her while she yet lived. I believe she would have been a kind and graceful sort. Aelfric smiles down towards the woman in the tank. If I had more time, I could have properly restored her to life. Then we would be wed as we brought the goddess clarity and justice back into this world. That twisted dream is over now, Edelgard asserts. I won't ask again. Come down. Aelfric looks at Edelgard with a sincere but nearly inhuman smile and uncanny gentleness radiating from his perverse grin. He removes a device from his belt and presses a button. A black fluid starts bubbling, writhing even, throughout the green liquid in the tank. Aelfric then drops into the tub. He swims down and grabs the woman, bringing her to the surface of the liquid. As he gasps for air, he embraces the woman closely. My love, though we cannot be together as I had intended, we will still be united as one. And with our power, we will protect our sheep and cleanse this world of its sinners. The black fluid starts clinging to their bodies as the monk rants, the goddess will smile upon our righteous matrimony as our bodies truly join together with her holy power. This will be a holy union to save the world. The man and the corpse are then dragged under by the brawny fluid. Edelgard and her crew step back, readying their weapons as the glass begins cracking. The few remaining knights are bound as their weapons are piled in a corner. The revolutionaries lead them towards the exit, their expressions downcast. As Lonato walks by Byleth, he speaks. Before you throw us in whatever cursed dungeon you have in store, I wish to speak with my son, he insists. All right, Byleth agrees. I think he'd want that. Suddenly, Edelgard buzzes in over comms, Byleth. Get down here quick. She hears glass shattering and metal crunching in the background. We need your help. There's a demonic beast. It's bigger than anything. Then red particles fill the air for a second. After, a massive burst of bloody energy fills the room, scattering both the revolutionaries and the remaining knights. Even Byleth is knocked on her feet, and as she regains her footing, she hears an unholy roar gurgle throughout the cathedral. The deep, resonant call echoes off of the dark walls. The revolutionaries, including Byleth, are shaken with fear as they see the creature. Draconic in nature, its charcoal hide extends longer than any demonic beast she or Gerald have previously encountered. Incomplete sinewy muscles wrap around its scales, bulging in ropes. Smaller veins and arteries, still covered in thick hide, branch off of the muscly fibers. Massive black wings stretch from one end of the cathedral to the other, adorned in jutting bones. Most unnatural of all is its head. The creature has two skulls fused together, one right side up, and the other upside down. Long horns curl out of the secondary skull, and a thick burgundy mane tresses out of its primary skull. Lonato gapes at the creature as he murmurs, "Aelfric, what in the name of the goddess have you done?" Chapter 44, Umbral Terror. A blinding red light distorts Edelgard's vision. Her body racks with a terrible internal agony merely a second later. She stumbles forward, attempting to regain her bearings as her vision refocuses. A young girl's voice calls out to her, muffled as though she's yelling to the Flame Emperor from within a glass chamber. "Miss Edelgard," the voice shouts. "Can you hear me, Miss Edelgard?" Edelgard scans around for the source of the voice, confused at the sight of dozens of blurry figures surrounding her. Then she sees a white blur with a fuzzy green top. What happened? Edelgard blinks. The silhouette focuses into flame. The ache inside Edelgard slowly dulls as she takes another look around. Without explanation, she's standing back at the entrance to the tower. She quickly notices Mercedes, Petra, and her smaller squad of Black Eagles alongside her, all clutching their stomachs in anguish. Then she recognizes Annette. The girl is already pulling her weight, performing healing magic on the Black Eagles. Flame calls back her attention. "We don't know what happened. All of a sudden, you appeared in a bright light. We were hoping you could tell us." "That fanatic," Edelgard grunts, "he turned into a demonic beast." She stands, but keels over in pain. "Easy now," Flame soothes as she heals Edelgard with magic. "He must have somehow teleported us," Edelgard groans. "But it wasn't like any warp spell I've ever seen, moving so many people at once and causing so much pain." Seath rests his hands on Flame's shoulder while he addresses Edelgard. "Unfortunately, this is the end result of such science. Where is this demonic beast now?" Edelgard shakes her head as she recovers her breath. "I don't know. If it can teleport, it could be anywhere." "Aelfric," they hear Ash shout as a small flash fills their periphery. The Black Eagles all turn to the source of the disturbance. The Mad Monk stands in front of them. "How is this possible?" Edelgard wonders. The monk's expression is blank as he stands completely still. "Aelfric, did you hear me?" Ash beckons. "What are you doing here? Get back!" Edelgard hollers at Ash just as Aelfric looses fire at the young man. Annette barely pulls Ash out of harm's way. Then she screams at Aelfric, "Why did you attack us?" The monk maintains his neutral expression. And then 10 more flashes of light reveal several Aelfric, each sharing the same taciturn lack of emotion. "What is this?" Annette trembles. "The demonic beast," Edelgard grits her teeth. "It must be using some form of ancient Nabatean magic. The real Aelfric is a part of that creature." "What creature?" Ash asks. "No time to explain. Just brace yourselves for a fight." The umbral beast swings its massive tail towards the revolutionaries and their captives. Red particles flow from a streak of energy which traces the tail's sharp movement. Most of the blade breakers barely dodge the strike, though a few of them along with the captured knights are sent into a wall. Their bodies collide with the stone, leaving crimson stains as they fall to the ground. Byleth launches fire into the creature's maw, temporarily setting its mane alight. The monster writhes and roars while Byleth uses the distraction to sprint towards the limp knights. She halts by Lonato. The man is alive but heaving. His face is split open as blood oozes from the gash. Byleth tries to move him, but he cries out. Realizing his spine is severed, she attempts to heal him. "Kid!" Geralt screams as he tears her away from the Lord of Knights. She doesn't bother scolding him as the umbral beast's heavy front leg crashes down atop Lonato. Another chaotic red aura fills the air following its attack. Geralt chides her as they gain distance from the monster. "Maybe you should be a little less hero and a little more demon right about now." Byleth frowns as she draws Lady at Midnight. The beast swings its tail in her direction again as she leaps above the attack. "If I didn't know better, I'd say it's targeting me." "Why is it targeting me?" In the air, she whips her blade into its foreleg. She slices the hide open, but her attack doesn't dig very deep. The umbral beast cries in pain as it swats at Byleth in midair. She shields herself from the blow, being sent hurtling into the wall behind her. She's planted a few feet into the stone as the umbral beast charges for her. The monster stops its rush and screams again as Geralt's blade cleaves into its hind leg. Yet even with his strength, the great sword doesn't burrow deeply into its appendage. The beast retaliates, and Geralt barely rolls out of the way of a back kick. That creature, he realizes, is more annoyed than hurt. Still, his attack buys Byleth enough time to leap out of the wall towards the creature. She summons fire point blank, exploding the spell directly into the creature's face. Embers fall from the shrieking creature's skull plating as it headbutts Byleth away. The Empress rolls along the floor, catching her footing while it recovers. The monster quickly regains its composure, thus Byleth decides not to give it another chance to attack. She summons Bolganone and fire swirls around its wounded hind leg, careering into the limb and bursting. It screeches and stumbles as a fierce blaze licks against its wound, opening it up a bit further. The umbral beast then raises up and slams its forelegs against the ground. The stone shreds underneath its weight while another red shine floods the cathedral. Byleth feels a searing pain inside her as she blinks away stars. She swiftly discovers that, not only is the beast gone, but she's now in the opposite corner of the cathedral with her back to the stained glass. In fact, all of the blade breakers have been repositioned. Some of them are missing altogether. More flashes of light pepper the room, and the duplicate forms of a strange monk appear. It's clear to her that these are lifeless spirits. Nonetheless, the puppets possess power as they launch assorted fire-type spells. Some of the blade breakers holler in pain as they combust, a small number of them burning alive. Leonie barely tumbles out from a burst of Ragnarok. She jumps to her feet and charges for the nearest spirit, dodging a fire as she runs. Her lance runs through the monk who doesn't let out so much as a groan from the injury. Instead, it merely dissipates in a flourish of red and white energy. Geralt blocks another one of the monk's fire spells with his great sword, giving Eloise the opportunity to rip through it from behind with his axe. Its severed halves bleed magic instead of liquid as it dissolves. The Ashen Empress whips her sword through one monk after shrugging off its Nosferatu, and she prepares to tear through the rest. However, a darkness blots out the lilac light of the stained glass window from behind her. She barely has time to turn towards the enormous shadow as the umbral beast collides with the cathedral from outside. Glass and stone scatter into the air as pillars are leveled under its wings. Its forefoot slams into Byleth, dragging her through the floor and obliterating Lonato's throne in the process. With a loud grunt, Byleth only just forces the scaly foot off of her as she rolls to the side. The umbral beast attempts to stomp her into the ground, but she dashes out of its path. She then attacks its head with an Nosferatu spell. The attack doesn't do much damage, but she counts on the bright sparkling that her magic unleashes against its eyes. The beast sways its head, disoriented. The Empress uses the opening to jump onto the creature's nape, thrusting her sword into its hide. She quickly withdraws the blade, then looses fire point blank into the wound. An inferno explodes from the gash, causing the monster to scream. It once again extends its wings, tearing up the stone walls as it does so. Byleth lodges her sword into the beast, realizing what comes next. The umbral beast flaps its wings, gusting back stone and bodies as the walls of the cathedral crack from its strength. Annette brings Crusher down on a spirit. The monk's body bursts into magic under the weight of her attack. The young woman instinctively shields her face from a blood spray that doesn't come. Ash guns down another copy of Aelfric next to them after barely dodging a fireball. I don't understand, why would Aelfric do this? Is this what he was working on in that lab of his, he asks. Edelgard answers as she cuts down another copy of the man. He made it sound as though this was his backup plan. In his mind, it's a scheme to cleanse the world should his other sickening ambition not succeed. The final Aelfric tumbles and dissolves as Seath impales it through the back with a vibro lance. Only seconds later, the whole building starts rumbling. An almost deafening crash then violently shakes the base of the tower. A cloud of dust and debris explode in through the entryway doors. Many of the revolutionaries scream and swear as they cling to whatever cover they can get their hands around. Once the dust settles, Edelgard and the others run outside to see the damage. Just over a dozen feet away, The entire decapitated roof of the tower lies in the dirt, upside down. A terrible cry draws their attention to the sky. The mist has dispersed, only to grant them a view of an ecliptic, draconic nightmare beating its wings against the moonlight as it flies. Ash quivers. "Oh, you meant that creature." "By the goddess," Seath gasps, "it so resembles our kind's primal form. How is such a thing even possible?" Edelgard sighs, "I'm not certain, but given what was in Aelfric's laboratory, I think it's the demonic beast form of a Nabatean, not a human." Annette shakes her head, "That's possible. How are we even supposed to fight that?" "Calm yourself," Edelgard orders. "Panic will not win us the day." "Edelgard." Mercedes interrupts, pointing upward. "Isn't that?" They see a golden burst of aura flash from the umbral beast's head. The monster struggles to fly straight, striking against the side of the tower. It then swerves away, spiraling downward and crashing into a nearby forest. Its massive form tears up trees by the roots as it slides against the soil. Byleth rolls off the creature, rasping for air. But before she can recover, the beast stumbles to its feet. With another burst of scarlet energy, both it and Byleth disappear. Byleth reappears a few yards above the Black Eagles. She plunges into the dirt as they run to her side. "Byleth!" Edelgard shouts. "Are you okay?" The Empress stumbles to her feet as the revolutionaries surround her. Her face is bruised, and she wipes at a smear of soil and blood plastered across her nose, lips, and chin. Mercedes prepares a heal spell, but Byleth gently pushes down her hands. "Byleth," Edelgard scolds, "let her help you." "I will heal," Byleth scowls, "but I'm going to take it from the creature's life." Another burst of red fills the night sky from high above them. The umbral beast reappears and descends, diving straight for their group. Everyone, save Byleth, scatters. The Ashen Empress, instead, readies her weapon. She waits till the beast draws closer, then summons thunder upon it, disrupting its descent. She jumps up above the creature as it crashes into the ground. In the air, Byleth whips Lady at Midnight downward, hooking it into the monster. As the beast slides into the entrance of the tower, Byleth retracts the blade, using it as a grapple to pull herself back onto the top of the beast. It struggles back to its feet while Byleth climbs its neck. Atop the umbral beast's skull, the Empress shouts, "Enough of this." She stabs her blade into the base of the monster's head, cracking through its skull. A warm light washes over Byleth as the crest of flames activates and eases her lacerations and bruises. Before the dazed creature can retaliate, Byleth immediately pulls back her blade and presses both hands against the wound in its head. Then she summons Ragnarok. The umbral beast's head explodes with fire and brain matter as charred bits of skull and red hair scatter into the air. Byleth falls off of the beast, landing on the destroyed stone pathway at the entrance of the tower. Her chest heaves as she gasps for breath. Beside her, the monster's charcoal hide melts away. The perfectly preserved body of a woman and Aelfric are left in its place. Edelgard approaches Byleth, taking her into her arms. "My hero," Byleth chokes as her muscles and joints ache from exhaustion, lungs burning. "Next time," Edelgard embraces her, "just let us heal you." They hear laughing and coughing a few feet away. They turn to the source Aelfric rolling on the ground, still alive. The monk clutches at his ribs while he chortles. Edelgard gently sets Byleth down on nearby rubble and picks up the man by the collar. Tears drizzle down his cheeks while he laughs. "Is this another test from the goddess?" he giggles. "To take everything away from me? Well, I'll still remain faithful to her cause. And in her ever after, I will be rewarded with the eternal hand of Citrai's love." "You think we're going to kill you?" Edelgard seethes. "You aren't escaping what you've done that easily." Edelgard stares in concern as Byleth guzzles an entire water bottle in one go. The Blunet fidgets as Mercedes pours over her with healing magic. "Easy, Professor," the doctor admonishes, "that strange crest power of yours only healed so much." Byleth turns to Edelgard, who was the woman Aelfric was with. "He said her name was Citrai, and, well, that's perhaps better left answered by Geralt." Edelgard rubs the Empress' forearm. "You need to talk to him." Byleth's eyes widen as she recognizes the woman's name, then she sighs, "Yeah, all right." Ash then approaches, fidgeting, About Lonato. Byleth frowns. Ash, I'm sorry. He clenches his jaw and swallows hard. Did you have to kill him? We didn't kill him. It was that creature. He glares at her. You had better not be lying to me. Ash, I tried to save him. That monster didn't let us take any survivors. Byleth shakes her head. Can we at least give him a proper burial? Byleth stares at her feet. You can hold services if you want to, but there isn't anything left to bury. Ash squeezes his eyes closed. I see. The boy meanders away. Annette meets up with him, and the pair takes their leave. Edelgard holds Byleth's hand for a time until the Blade Breakers rejoin their forces. The Emperor and Empress see Geralt from a distance. Edelgard gestures him over. Yeah, kid? Did you need something? Geralt asks. Edelgard turns to Byleth and pecks her on the cheek. I'll give you two some time to sort things out. She and Mercedes leave and an awkward silence settles between the two relatives. So, Geralt begins. I'm sorry, Byleth huffs. I don't know how to do this. How to be a good daughter, I mean. With the words finally out in the open, a strange weight hangs between the two. No, I'm sorry, kid, Geralt sighs. It was my job to watch out for you. It's ironic, as excited as I was to be a dad, I ended up sucking at it. You weren't a failure as a father. I'm just bad at being a daughter, she replies. Look at us, he dryly chuckles, a real pity parade. I guess the only thing either of us know how to do right is fight. I'm sorry you take after me and not your mother. Yeah, Byleth curls her knees into her chest. Geralt scratches his beard. Then again, you went out of your way to save those brats. And you did everything you could to try to help the knights. That sort of heart can only come from Citrai. You certainly don't get it from me. Byleth sits silently. He ponders for a moment before continuing. It seems like Edelgard is really special to you. Here, he pulls a ring from a pouch on his belt. I never thought I'd get the opportunity to give this to you. But since you two already see fit to call each other Emperor and Empress, you two could probably use this. Byleth takes the ring, a bit shocked as she identifies its design from the other world. Yeah, I know, he sighs, it's an old-fashioned bit of jewelry. It's perfect, she faintly grins. They stay in silence for another moment before Byleth starts again. Aelfric used the body of some woman to become that monster. Edelgard told me her name, and I recognized it. She purses her lips. Citrai. For the first time in nearly a century, Geralt feels a simmering rage broil within him. He tightens his fists as he sucks in air through his teeth. That weaselly little son of a bitch, he spits. That's what those assholes wanted with her body. Chapter 45, The Next Step. Do you want us to go in with you, Captain? Leonie asks. She and Eloise hover by the entrance to a high-security room located within the dungeons of Fodlan's Locket. Geralt hands some identification to a guard who greenlights him. The automatic door to the room swings open, flanked on either side by two more guards. The old mercenary shakes his head. Thanks but no thanks. This is personal. The pair solemnly nod as Geralt enters the room. The area is box-like with 3 stone walls and 1 steel. A one-sided window mounts the adjacent side of the room. The thick security door, affixed to the steel wall, closes behind Geralt. In the center sits a square cell. When Aelfric sees Geralt, he smiles and stands, wrapping his fingers around the bars of his confines. Ah, the famous blade breaker, the monk smiles. Though he grins, the man has puffy red eyes and tear stains on his cheeks. To what do I owe the honor? That woman, Citrai, what the hell did you want with her? Geralt grits. The wondrous angel from a bygone era. Aelfric beams. Have you, too, been taken by her loveliness? Cut the shit. Why'd you do it? Her power was necessary for summoning the goddess Wrath, Aelfric explains. He turns and sits down on his small metal-framed mattress. And I must admit, I found her to be quite enthralling. There is a grace to her that transcends the beauty of ordinary women. As you yourself have seen, it even transcends death. Geralt sighs. Goddess, Edelgard was right. You're completely deranged. I'd pity you if you weren't so pathetic and sick. Aelfric frowns. I know I might seem deranged to the common man, but I'm one of the only ones to whom the goddess has revealed her truth. And that's why you lost, right? Aelfric tuts. Oh, she is but testing my resolve. We must all face defeats. It is how we stand against such losses that defines us in her eyes. I will be rewarded for my faith in the end. The security door opens again and in walks Byleth. Leonie dashes in after her, apologizing. Sorry, Captain, she insisted on coming in. It's all right, Gerald shakes his head. She has every right to be here, too. Leonie furrows her brow. I don't follow. I'll explain later, Gerald says. The door closes behind Byleth as she walks forward and stares at Aelfric. The monk pays her no mind at first, but leaps to his feet and grasps against the bars once he gets a good look at her. You. How do you look so much like her, he gasps. Goddess above, the resemblance is invigorating. Are you sure you want to be here? Gerald asks. He isn't exactly firing on all cylinders. Yes, Byleth nods. Could you be? Aelfric smiles. Are you the child that was buried with her? Byleth says nothing as she stares him down. Joy to the heavens. You are, he actually bows. You know, dear child, you are the reason that I knew your mother could be brought back. By a miracle, one of our denominations had restarted your heart days after you had been buried. For so long, we were uncertain of how the goddess gave us such a marvel since that denomination was destroyed by an unknown force. I had feared we lost you, and the hope you brought us, forever, young one. I know. I was the one that killed them, Byleth states bluntly. Gerald grimaces but says nothing. A pang of guilt surges through him. Aelfric shakes his head. Oh, dear child, how unfortunate, though I don't hold it against you. How could you possibly understand the necessity of our cause whilst so young? If only you had stayed with us, you could have helped me resurrect your mother. When people are dead, you can't bring them back, she says. How could you say such a thing? Aelfric sulks. What cruel child would not wish to bring back her own mother? Besides, did we not bring you back? Has time not shown that it is possible? I'm not like anyone else, Byleth scowls. You and Rhea made sure of that. I was just your experiment, a test run to bring back people you couldn't accept were gone. I'm not human. I'm not Nabatean. Derived from both peoples but a part of neither. I'm just a thing you cooked up in a basement. A failed replacement turned living weapon. How can I be alive when a person can't come back from the dead? Simple. You both made sure I wasn't a real person. Byleth turns to leave, but Gerald stops her. He stands there, mouth agape, desperately trying to find something to say. Instead, all he asks is, who's Rhea? Byleth just shakes her head as she leaves. It doesn't matter. Aelfric chortles, if only the girl could have known the goddess the way I have. Maybe then she would have seen the truth. Without a word, Gerald simply grabs his collar and yanks him against the bars. The monk hits his forehead and slumps against the floor unconscious. Meanwhile, Byleth trots away from the dungeons. Flayn and Seath stop her in the hallway. Ah, Seath begins, how fortuitous. We were both hoping for a chance to speak with you. Byleth, still sour, merely says, it's ironic. I inherited the power of the goddess, yet everyone thinks I'm a demon. I beg your pardon. Seath raises his eyebrow. It's nothing, Byleth says. I know you must be in a foul mood. Flayn clasps her hands together, but we wish you to know that we have cremated Miss Citrai so that no one else might utilize her. Byleth sighs before replying, thank you. Seath continues, I'm frankly surprised that we reunited after all these years. I never expected Citrai's daughter to have become the Ashen Empress. Though, that does explain your hybrid nature with humans. And you turned out remarkably strong. Flayn exclaims. Much like your father. How blessed. She then takes Byleth's hand. I know you feel upset by recent discoveries, but please know that we both consider you to be like family to us, no matter what may transpire. Isn't that right, father? Seath blushes and nods, yes, well. I am not certain I'd phrase it so, sentimentally, but that is correct. You are among the last of our kind, so naturally we'd feel a connection. Byleth faintly smiles. I appreciate your words, even if I'm not truly one of your kind. Flayn frowns. Please. Such negative words will not do. Just because you are part human does not mean you cannot be our family. A commanding voice echoes across the hall as Edelgard approaches, and just because you're part Nabatean does not mean you have no humanity. Edelgard, Byleth greets. Edelgard nods. It's time for our war council to begin soon, and since you no longer have to hide your identity, I wish for you to attend. If I recall correctly, you were my best strategist in the other world. What other world? Seath asks. Edelgard sighs. Don't worry about that. All right, Claude begins, leaning back in his chair. Now that the knights have been dealt with, what's next in our agenda? Edelgard folds her hands on the table. I have my sights currently set on the capital of Faerghus. Fhirdiad. Holst bucks. This early in the game. I like it. Nader shouts. It's bold. Take the fight to them, I say. Edelgard chuckles. I assure you, I have more reasoning behind this than reckless patriotism. She gestures towards Holst and Hilda, then to Judith. Thanks to the Goneril, Daphnel, and Gloucester families, Leicester is essentially under our control already. Yuri's gang and the Blade Breakers ensure that we control central Fodlan. That leaves Adrestia and Faerghus. We must work our way to Fhirdiad and seize control of it before the Empire wisens to our authority over Ro and Karen and then retaliates. In this case, the best defense is a good offense. We need to keep Cornelia on the back foot while we have the advantage of obscurity. Holst shakes his head. As much as I love the idea of bringing the fight to them, I gotta point out that we have a bit of territory to work through before that happens. Not as much as you might think, Edelgard explains. I already have Ingrid working in Galatea territory. As some of you may or may not know, Ingrid comes from the Galatea family. I've been having her reconnect with her father so she can take the territory from the inside. She's faked a story about dangerous encounters with our revolutionaries and asked him to transfer additional enforcers into his territory, our enforcers. With any luck, we won't see a single drop of blood spilt. After she's done, we should be able to move our forces from Karen, through Galatea, and deeper into Faerghus. Nice. Claude compliments. From there, we basically just have to deal with Frildarius. Then it's Fhirdiad, sweet Fhirdiad. Edelgard smirks and nods. That is the plan. Wait, Holst frowns. Once we have Galatea, why don't we just pass directly to Fhirdiad from the Tailtean plains? Oh gods, even I know that one, Nader scoffs. Edelgard answers, the plains would make it very easy for their satellite imagery to pick up our migrating forces. Such a large open space would also make us a far easier target for their javelin strike. A motherfucking coward's tool, Nader sneers. They used it to wreck a couple of our armies in the last war. Holst shakes his head. If they were going to use a javelin strike against us, then wouldn't they just use it against one of our bases anyway? Civilians be damned. Byleth interrupts, no. Though powerful, the attack is based on ancient technology and old magics. They won't waste its uses sparingly. When it comes to populated districts, it will be much harder for them to determine whether or not Edelgard is within the suspected area. Furthermore, the signal interference from an overabundance of civilian electronics and the sheer height of dozens of skyscrapers make the accuracy of the weapon drop substantially. Another incentive for them to avoid the risk is the optics. If they mistakenly obliterate a civilian population while failing to kill the heads of our forces, it will damage the Empire's reputation as omnipotent. The incompetence and casualties would all but guarantee a bolster to our cause. Each use of the weapon takes months to prepare, thus they won't use it unless they have a clear shot. Traveling through Tailtean would just serve us up on a silver platter. But taking their own territory from them while maintaining a shroud over our true whereabouts will make it far more difficult for them to target us. Claude raises an eyebrow. You seem to know an awful lot about that weapon. I did infiltrate in Bear Library. And I've seen the weapon firsthand, she clarifies. I know how it works. In any case, Edelgard continues, traveling through the plains is not an option. Once we have control over Galatea, we'll strike at Frildarius, and from there, we'll be in range to take the capital. Ah, yeah. Nader pumps his fist. I can't wait to take down Cornelia. I've had it with her weird schemes. The witch acts like everyone should be just as pale as her. Easy there, big guy, Claude sighs. I'm happy to take down that sociopath, but like you said, she is a schemer. We can't be too careful when dealing with her forces. Ha. Nader scoffs. Takes one to know one. Either way, Edelgard rubs her brow, Claude is right. We'll need to be on our guard when dealing with her. She's shown that she's willing to go to any extreme to win. Chapter 46, Count Galatea. Ingrid carefully cuts into her roast. The dark, tender meat is juicy and well-dressed, accented by scalloped potatoes and maple-glazed carrots. A plate of fresh baked fruit and herring tarts sits on the center of the dining room table, cooling in time for the dessert. The table itself is teakwood given a glossy finish with cabriole legs. It extends across the long dining room, surrounded by elaborate chairs. The pristine white walls are clad with portraits of Galatea ancestors and Nemesis elites. The two largest paintings, rimmed with golden frames, are of Daphne and Nemesis themselves and sit at opposite ends of the room. The ornate wooden doors are bordered by butlers and enforcers. Gunnar Galatea sits at the head of the empty table whilst Ingrid sits to his right. The light tinging of silverware against porcelain can be heard, alongside the wet mastication of beef as hardly a word is spoken between the two. The rigid man wears a six-button double-breasted navy suit. His goatee is immaculately trim with a well-waxed upward curl to his mustache. His fading blonde hair parts directly down the middle, also waxed into downward curling bangs. Round glasses adorn his crinkled green eyes as he slowly chews. Then he breaks the silence. Are you ready to talk about what you did to Glenn? Ingrid takes a breath before she begins. Why do you think I did it? Gunnar sighs. You mean to trap me with that question? Just entertain the idea. Very well, he replies. You were having an existential quandary about your life. Things were too stagnate. Perhaps you were unsettled by your friend's brother's death. You made an impulsive decision to break your marriage oath, and thus, you betrayed your vow to a family who has been very generous to us. Frankly, you are much too young to have a midlife crisis, my dear. Or maybe this was a late form of teenage rebellion. Ingrid wipes her lips with a napkin. You think this was about seeking some form of rush? Why else would you follow such an ungrateful, and, candidly, whorish, course of action? Did you justify this to yourself as some form of punishment to enact upon us? I will admit, your life has been very structured and strict, but that was for everyone's benefit. I didn't do it to punish either him or you, she explains. And I didn't do it because I'm the type to pursue cheap thrills. Oh, he squints. Then, by all means, please enlighten me on the sensibility of your clearly wise adultery. Perhaps the fact that you had to crawl back to me after losing your place of living has blinded me to the truth. Father, she enunciates, ignoring his pricks, you mentioned that my life was structured and strict, but truthfully, that undersells my experience far too much. In reality, my entire life has been a puppet show run by others. It's one thing for a child to have a disciplined upbringing. It is another matter entirely when a parent feels they have the right to determine their child's entire course in life. Ah, so it's about some perverse twist on taking control. It seems as though this is a latent form of teenage rebellion, then. I suppose you were too busy during your actual adolescent years to experience it. Ingrid frowns. I suppose you're just going to belittle all the emotions I've been struggling with my entire life simply because it's inconvenient for you. Inconvenient is too soft a word, I'd say, Gunnar retorts. You have dashed our family's reputation against the rocks, as well as my efforts for both you and our social standing. I labored since your birth to set you up with proper suitors. As far as I'm aware, Glenn has neither beaten nor verbally abused you. He has been a good husband at every turn. Ingrid scoffs, and therefore, I owed it to you all to be sold away without any true form of consent. Because it made our family money. After all, why should I complain? Glenn has the most basic sense of decency not to hit me, and he's wealthy. That's all I should ever ask from a partner. Don't be melodramatic, girl. You can tell me not to be melodramatic when you know what it's like to have your entire life be treated like a bargaining chip, she counters. When everyone thinks they have the right to control every aspect of your life, that they always know better than you. Bargaining chip, he raises an eyebrow. You wanted for nothing because of the efforts of Mr. Frildarius and myself. Efforts that brought our family back from the brink. You can concoct as many speeches as you want. Nothing will mask your ingratitude. Father, she grits. Taking care of a child is the most basic responsibility of a parent. If you cannot simply feed a child without holding it over their head to control of them, then you are a failure as a parent. Children are sentient people if you haven't noticed, not property to be used in your plans. I am not an extension of your ambitions. And yet you still benefit from those plans, he responds. Truly, our whole house benefited from your sacrifice. A sacrifice that is often necessary for people in our position. Call it unfair if you like, but young women, and indeed even men, must sacrifice their choice in love and career for the sake of their family and their country. That is trade-off for our lives of luxury. Ingrid shakes her head, but men are often given more leeway in choosing their brides, especially when they have an age difference. Either way, it is a horrible thing to force upon anyone of any gender. As for your flawed notion of sacrifice, someone taught me that sacrifice is a choice. You didn't give me a choice, you gave me an ultimatum. I had to marry myself off. Moreover, our country has plenty of wealth. Something tells me that the governance wouldn't have actually suffered if I chose my own partner in life. And then there's the matter of our family's wealth. Yes, we were straining compared to our peers, but do you know how many hundreds of millions of people starve on the streets all over the world because of the empire's lack of resources for the underprivileged? We did suffer some degree of economic hardships, but that was nothing compared to the trials of the masses under Nemesis. Even then, we were still enormously privileged. You convinced yourself that we were on the cusp of starving. We really weren't, Father. Gunnar clenches his jaw and lightly slaps Ingrid. Glenn had warned me that Sylvain Brad had influenced you with his rebellious rhetoric. I didn't think you had fallen so far as to speak so freely against the Empire. I might have been too generous to let you spend time with him growing up. Ingrid doesn't react to the strike. She merely turns up her nose and admonishes, call it what you will. No material possessions are worth selling your daughter away. Or really anyone's freedom over their own life. Ha, he ridicules. It sounds as though you've been listening to those obscenities from that Hresvelgwitch. Didn't you yourself claim that those terrorists attacked you? Ingrid shakes her head, an unfortunate deception to ensure that this exchange was bloodless. I beg your pardon. Ingrid rises from her seat. Her chair scrapes across the floor as she stands tall. She motions to the guards who approach the table and pull Gunnar up by the arms. What? What is this? What are you doing? The man panics. Little girls will no longer be sold in this world, because Edelgard and I will not allow Nemesis and his Agarthans to continue their millennium rule. You, he gasps, you aren't seriously betraying me to those radical dogs? You can't possibly be capable of this. Ingrid glares at her father. I am capable of far more than you give me credit for. It would seem so, Gunnar seethes. Lying, seduction, debauchery, and spitting venom towards your own husband and father, you have become quite the viper. I acknowledge, for your sake, that I am partly to blame for your actions. After I had to institute your mother, it fell to me to raise you. Though I was not qualified to raise a girl, I still attempted it as best as I was able for you. It seems I granted you too much leeway and did not properly instill the value of appreciation. Ingrid folds her arms. You can keep writhing about it under house arrest. I had hoped to convince you to join our cause, but it appears that isn't possible. House arrest, he balks. You can't be serious, girl. This is my territory. I built it back up with my own connections, my own wits. Not anymore. It is now property of the United Revolutionary Army, Ingrid explains. And I am not girl. I am Count Galatea of Faergus. You can try to steal that title all you like, Gunnar spits. It rightfully belongs to your brother. It rightfully belongs to the people, she retorts. Governor Arnhem, Rodrigue Bose, it is as you suspected. All of the counts from the Gaspard, Ro, Karen, and Galatea regions have shown patterns of suspicious behavior as of late. Humph, Cornelia smirks. She crosses her legs, sipping tea under the shade of a gaudy gazebo. It was honestly quite predictable. Those worms are trying to undermine us from the inside out. Admittedly, given that bitch's heritage, I half expected her to throw her forces directly against Adrestia in a fool's suicide run. Still, I had to assume that she has part of a brain, at least. Rodrigue subtly grimaces. Governor Arnim, what do you want our forces to do? My men can meet them at Frildarius, since taking my territory is likely their next course of action. Don't worry about your pitiable scrap of land, Cornelia tuts. Lord Thales seems to think they have the Ashen Demon amongst their forces. If such is the case, it would behoove us to consolidate our forces here in Fhirdiad. Besides, it would make for a romantic tale, don't you think, if it was my forces who crushed them into the ground in my very own capital? Governor Arnim, I agree that pooling our resources could be beneficial, but I'm not sure if. Don't strain that tiny human mind of yours trying to question Agarthan intellect, Cornelia chuckles. We have the necessary resources to slaughter them here. For the demon, I have my precious pet turtle. Then a special upcomer of mine can deal with the mindless terrorist mercenaries. And for the last Hresvelg. She snaps her fingers. From a distance, Emil walks towards them, armored in black plates and a frayed cape, a great moving shadow. Governor, Rodrigue purses his lips, must we use him? His tendency towards uncontrolled violence is. Cornelia again cuts him off, just what we need against the idiotic brats. Emil adds in his unnaturally slow cadence, do not worry. I will keep Death's Feast contained to our enemies. We will bathe the streets in their blood. And without the demon to protect the Flame Emperor, I will finally claim victory over her in our reunion. Cornelia laughs, see that, Roddy? Now that's confidence and devotion to our cause. You should try it sometime. Rodrigue bows, Governor Arnim, I assure you I am most loyal to our cause. As unsavory as it becomes at times. Oh, don't look so down, Cornelia taunts. My victory, and subsequently your victory, are assured. Try to be more excited for our coming plan. Like your son when he cuts down the Empire's enemies. Or Emil, here. Though we are at war, we can still have fun demolishing our enemies. Rodrigue sighs, as you say, ma'am. I will begin transferring my forces to the capital post-haste. Chapter 47, Prelude to Conquest. The War Council gathers round a conference table in one of the main offices of Frildarius City Hall. Just as the report had said, all Imperial forces had evacuated the city and retreated to the capital. All cabinets and offices had been completely stripped of documents, leaving the building eerily vacant as the revolutionary forces occupied it. Did you see the civilians' faces as we marched in without a hint of resistance? Claude asks with a hint of remorse. They're so scared of us. True. Nader booms. They know we mean business. Try to have some empathy, Judith scolds. Edelgard looks at Claude, you're not used to people looking at you like you're the villain, are you? Claude shrugs, not really, no. That's why I prefer to do most of this out of view and try to get as many people on my side as possible. Regardless, Edelgard shakes her head, we need to focus on our mission. We can't afford to slow down. She presses a button on a projector. The device emits a blue holographic image of Fhirdiad which floats in the center of the council. Edelgard draws out a short electronic wand which allows her to highlight regions on the map. She first points to the main road in the city that leads almost directly towards the Capitol building. She begins, with the satellite imagery Bernadetta has hacked, we know that the bulk of their forces are defending the entryways into the Capitol building. While the main road is the most heavily defended, any side streets that close in on the central building are still fortified. Edelgard then highlights the Capitol building itself. The structure is built like an old-fashioned castle with a technological overhaul, as opposed to a standard office building. Of course, that doesn't mean we're out of the woods once we get to the main compound. Cornelia essentially has a fortress to defend herself, which means she'll have several tactical advantages. So then, Claude interjects, you're thinking about a multi-pronged assault to split their forces, right? Edelgard nods, correct. We'll need a four-pronged approach specifically. First, we need Nader and Judith to lead the Amirans against the majority of their forces in the city streets. That will keep their masses from swarming in on the rest of us while we're in the fortress. Finally, Nader roars. I get to cut loose. I was afraid you were going to keep me on the sidelines this whole time. Judith sighs, that's because most of our operations thus far have required subtlety, something you lack. Ha! Your Japs mean nothing. Nader the undefeated will have his moment against the Empire. And what will the rest of us be doing? Claude inquires. Edelgard answers, as I said, there will still be a large concentration of forces in the capital. The Blade Breakers, Shamir's troop, and the Golden Deer will engage them, led by our allies from Faerghus, since they are more familiar with the layout of the area. She turns to Ingrid. Count Galatea, are you prepared for those whom you might have to face? Ingrid nods. I am. I despise doing this, but I am. Luckily for Sylvain, his father retired from active service some years ago. I doubt he'll have to worry about striking down Count Gautier. The only one any of us will know is Glenn. Claude cuts in and points to Byleth. That's all well and good, but what about your living super weapon? Shouldn't she be drawing the bulk of their troops? Edelgard shakes her head. No. Byleth will be head for their basement. That's the third prong. Basement. Nader scoffs. Why waste her on the basement? Is there something important down there? Byleth responds, we have no idea what's down there. But Cornelia is an Agarthan, and the Capitol building is a major Imperial installation. Of course there's going to be sublevels. My duty is to strike there first to destroy whatever inhuman weapons they will likely try to unload on the rest of you. Demonic beasts could easily shift the tide on any one of our fronts. Once I've cleared the basement, I'm to join the forces attacking the bulk of the Capitol fortress. Claude nods his head. I'm assuming that's to help keep their guys off of our last prong, which I also assume is Edelgard taking the fight directly to Cornelia. Edelgard affirms, that's correct. I will be leading the Black Eagles in a direct assault against Cornelia's personal guard. I need the rest of you to clear a path for us. The sooner we capture or kill Governor Arnim, the sooner their other forces will stand down, and losses will be averted on both sides. It will also make overcoming her personal guard much easier without the support of her full army. Claude scratches his chin. Splitting us up sounds a bit risky, but I'm in. Nader bellows, you had me sold at the beginning. I'm ready to slaughter their asses. Well, if nothing else, Claude chuckles, Nader's raucous aggression will attract a lot of their forces away from us. Good, Edelgard says. If that's all settled, then we need to fill in the rest our forces and prepare for tomorrow's battle. Byleth finds Catherine in a makeshift training area in a courtyard behind Frildarius City Hall. With Thunderbrand in hand, the swordswoman swings at training dummies and trees, obliterating each with a powerful strike. Orange-red flashes emanate from the blade every time she dashes it against a target. Her ferocity leads her to pulverize each and every one of her inanimate victims. Byleth recognizes the rage in each strike. Her rage screams through her movements. Catherine. The swordswoman startles, shit. Byleth, wear a bell or something. I saw you training from the window, and I thought I'd see how you were doing. Catherine scoffs, you still scared I'm going to get myself killed? It isn't just about your life, I don't want to see anyone I care about get twisted by revenge, Byleth answers. Thanks for your input, but last I checked, revenge against the Empire is as good a reason as any to fight, she huffs. Catherine then swings against another training dummy with a cry, severing it in two and leaving a small burning impact on the incision of each half. Besides, I have a relic now. Those Imperial bastards could barely touch me before, so they certainly can't touch me now. Byleth watches Catherine train for a minute longer. The swordswoman makes it abundantly clear through her wordless grunts and strikes that she doesn't wish to continue discussion. Byleth eventually leaves, seeking out Geralt's mercenaries. She finds the Blade Breakers stationed in a loading dock which they're now using as a garage. However, Geralt himself is not present. She meanders around until she finds Leonie trying out a new Vibrolance. So, whatcha think? Leonie asks Byleth as she swings through the air. It's a high-quality weapon, to be sure, Byleth nods. By any chance, have you seen Geralt? Leonie pauses for a second, then she sets the lance down against a wall. She takes a rag and wipes some sweat off her brow as she gives Byleth a look. You know, Gerald finally explained to me who you were. Byleth stares at Leonie without a word. Leonie sighs and continues, the captain basically raised me. Yeah, I kinda pushed him into it when I was a kid, but I made it through the last several years because of him. He taught me how to fight. He taught me how to survive the Empire. He taught me everything I know about being a mercenary. He taught me about being a person. It took me years to earn enough trust from him to learn about what happened with his wife and kid. I realized that that's probably why he took me in. He needed someone to keep him sane. Though we weren't ever related by blood, we were family, you know. Byleth nods, he really cares about you. Yeah, Leonie folds her arms and looks down. Here's the thing, having you here changes things. You were the daughter he thought he'd lost, and suddenly you're back in his life. But I gotta ask, you were both here for so many weeks before he found out. Why'd you keep it a secret? All those years he had to hold on to that burden, and you didn't say a damn thing to him. Byleth frowns, that's complicated. Complicated? You clearly wanted to avoid him for some reason. And now that he's found out, you're trying to act like nothing happened between you two. Leonie puts her hands on her hips and leans forward. I put so much effort into getting where I am today, so much training, so much pushing, so much damn strain. I had to listen to naysayers and jackasses look down on me my whole life, telling me that some butch, tomboy cunt would never be good enough for the Blade Breakers. I took it all in stride, just to prove that I'm worthy to stand by the captain, to prove that I was worthy of being taken under his wing. And here you come, just waltzing in like you're entitled to it all. You never knew him. You didn't work to get your powers. I'm not going to let you shove me aside just because you happen to be related. You were the one that wanted to avoid him in the first place. As far as I'm concerned, I'm more his family than you ever will be, and I'm not gonna let you just take that from me. Byleth looks down. I never meant to. Of course you didn't, she scowls. After all, that would actually require knowing him. I'll stay out of your way then, Byleth says. Leonie sighs again and furrows her brow. Look, I didn't intend to get this worked up about it, but some of us have to fight for these sorts of things. I know you don't mean anything by it, so I'm telling you now. Is everything all right here? A commanding voice barks. Oh, Miss Edelgard, ma'am, Leonie nods. What brings you down here? The Flame Emperor marches up to the two women. I was simply searching for Byleth since I assumed she would be here. Then I noticed that you seemed rather heated. Leonie nods. Ah, yeah, that's personal stuff. Yes, I overheard. You're upset about Geralt, and Byleth stealing him away. Leonie scratches her chin. Like I said, it's personal, so I'd appreciated it if you didn't. No, please. Go on. I wish to hear more about how an orphaned child doesn't deserve to have her only family back. Perhaps Byleth has something to say on the matter. She glances at Byleth, who just stares at her own boots with an anxious, confused expression. Leonie glowers. Goddess, what's wrong with you? I told you this was personal. And it's more complicated than that. I'm not losing everything I worked so hard for because some rando decided to just saunter up and take it. I wasn't aware familial connections were a limited resource to be stolen, Edelgard derides. Of course you wouldn't understand, Leonie grumbles. The fiery mercenary walks away, taking her lance as she leaves. Edelgard rubs her temple as she looks at Byleth. She asks, please tell me you aren't going to start avoiding Geralt again because she's jealous. Byleth looks at her. I don't. Byleth. Byleth says nothing as she stares back down at her boots. Edelgard sighs as she takes Byleth's hand. She is just being jealous. You aren't going to make Geralt feel better by evading him again. But after everything she's been through. Edelgard cuts her off. Leonie earned her place both here and by Geralt's side, but the work she's done doesn't negate what you need. Besides, what sort of world would this be if people had to earn their families? Relationships aren't a transaction. You've done nothing wrong by wanting to be with your father. I suppose, Byleth replies. Just don't let her get to you, Edelgard states. You've come too far for that. Transports barrel through the main road towards Fhirdiad's central fortress. Judith, Nader, and their faction had arrived earlier that morning. In their wake, the streets are strewn with demolished vehicles and corpses. Ash and smoke pollute the air just as fires plague the streets. From a viewing slit in the lead vehicle, Edelgard watches as Almiran forces clash against enforcers. Chaotic gunfire and vibroblades clash, filling the city with blood and steel, clanging off the reinforced metal of the revolutionaries' transports. A massive barricade of armored Imperial vehicles and concrete roadblocks shields the entrance to the fortress. The structure itself has a 3-story set of blast doors several feet thick with steel. As they approach at high speeds, Edelgard beckons for Byleth to take care of it. On it, the Ashen Empress responds in her synthesized voice as she climbs on the roof of the transport. She whips her sword into the barricade, loosening the layers of metal and concrete whilst sending enforcers fleeing. Then, with a burst of Bolganone, she explodes apart the vehicles and roadblocks. Next, she summons Aura down on the doors, superheating them. As their transports draw near, careening only several yards away, the Empress launches fire at the doors. With an explosion, the transports flood into the main courtyard of the fortress as bits of melted metal rain down from the entrance. Their vehicles skid around the piazza, coming to a halt while gunfire rains down on the vehicles. Byleth whips her blade into the gunmen, pushing the rest to retreat within the fortress. Revolutionaries then spill from the transports. Edelgard. Ingrid calls out. Are you sure you don't need a guide to reach Cornelia? I appreciate your concern, Edelgard nods back to her friend, but Bernadetta's schematics will be more than sufficient. I still need you to help guide the others through this fortress so we can clear out as many enemies as possible. If you want to help me, then stop them from sending reinforcements to Cornelia. Very well, Ingrid's brow furrows. Sylvain rests a hand on her shoulder. Come on, Ingrid. We've got to get going. What are you two waiting for? Felix shouts from a few yards away. She looks to the Flame Emperor. Just take care of yourself, Edelgard. And the same goes for you, the Emperor nods. Ingrid meets up with the rest of her forces, who are then joined by the other assorted mercenary teams. All right, she begins, we need to fan out through the base so we can keep those creeps off Edelgard. Just let me at him. Catherine shouts from the crowd. Ingrid continues, the Blade Breakers will be with me, Shamir's troop will go with Sylvain, and Felix will guide the Golden Deer. Do I really need to waste my time with them? Felix grumbles. Claude sighs, pleased to be working with you, too. Sylvain winks at Shamir, don't worry. I'm okay with our arrangement. The sniper promptly ignores him. Geralt nods at Ingrid, okay, kid. Lead the way. Chapter 48, Blades Crossed. Claude looses an arrow of light into an enforcer. With a scream, she tumbles off a balcony, landing in the lower level of Fhirdiad Library. Raphael punches another enforcer into a bookcase beside her body. A third collapses by Claude. Hilda yanks her axe out of his corpse. She turns to Claude and asks, so, like, where'd that edgy guy go? Wasn't he supposed to be leading us around this place? Claude grits his teeth, Felix. Yeah, he was. I haven't seen him in like 10 minutes, though. I'm pretty sure our babysitter left us to fend for ourselves. But why, though? She cocks her head. He didn't seem overly fond of us. I'm guessing he bolted as soon as Edelgard and Ingrid were out of range, he explains. Huh, Raphael shrugs just after folding a man. I wonder where he went. Enforcers reluctantly clear the way for Felix as he walks down a hall. The Imperials line the path for him, leading him into a training room. Felix enters the chamber. A familiar scent of metal and sweat washes over him. The area is barren. A padded wooden floor. Blank walls. No windows. A circle painted in the middle for certain training exercises. There are no other Imperials in the room save one, Glenn. Glenn rises from a seated position. The door behind Felix closes as he approaches his brother. Both draw vibro swords and stand a certain number of paces apart from each other, taking stances trained into them since childhood. Glenn speaks, it's unfortunate that you've let your cynicism blind you. Words cannot express the sorrow father felt when you left. Felix glares, and what words would describe your sorrow when Ingrid left? At that, Glenn charges for Felix. Their blades clash, sparking a small shower of embers from the heat and friction of their vibro weapons. With each swing from Glenn, Felix blocks. The younger brother then counters forward. Glenn parries, briefly leaving Felix open. But the younger sword master backsteps in time to avoid the consequential swing. Stooping to insults, Glenn admonishes. You really don't have any better counter-argument. I've had counter-arguments for years, Felix retorts. A lot of us have. You just never listened, so we're through talking to you. So you mean to let our blades do the talking? Glenn says. That's the only thing that's left. I don't mean to be a bother, Sylvain shouts. His relic cleaves through a vibro shield, disrupting its energy field as the lance burrows into an enforcer, knocking her out of a third-story window onto a flower bed below. But we could really use your girlfriend right about now. Damn it, I know. Shamir shouts back. With one hand, she impales a vibro sword into an enforcer charging at her. She uses his body as a shield while she fires upon other targets, rifle in her other hand. I swear to fate, when I see that idiot again. Catherine sprints out onto the rooftop of a secondary building. The chaos below her echoes through the air, plumes of smoke rising with the noise. There you are, she seethes. Though I saw your smug face down there. Shay grimaces, I recognize you. You were at Karen. Yeah, I was. And now, I'm going to kill you. Look, I'm sorry about your friend, Shay sighs, but he attacked me first. We've both been in battle, so we both know that's just how things go sometimes. He picked a fight, and he lost. Catherine smirks, though her brow scrunches in anger, then you shouldn't take it personally when I slice your damn head off. Enforcers flee. The ones that stay are vaporized by aura. The Ashen Empress slices her way through blast doors. Down, down, and down again. Enforcers either run, or stay to meet their quick but graphic end at her blade. The lights of the sublevels radiate red in emergency, though that only adds to the panic of the Imperials as they attempt to handle the Empress descending further into the Forbidden Laboratory. She swats her enemies aside, finding herself at the final floor just before a high-grade security door. Unlike the previous sublevels, this one has no hallways. Spacious. This must be where they keep the lab for demonic beasts, she thinks. Placing one hand on the door, she drives her blade straight into the seam at the frame of the doorway, creating a wedge. She pushes, and the sheet of metal gives. Folding forward, the door collapses in front of Byleth. There are no lights. Only a void-like expanse of darkness stretching out before her. The Empress listens to the quiet, hearing deep, distorted breathing. Then, the lights switch on. The chamber is massive. A stretch of graded stairs leads from the entryway into a large open area. In the center of said area stands a four-legged creature which is decidedly not a demonic beast. He extends to nearly thrice the length of a standard beast. His scaly hide is thick, nigh impenetrable even, bolstered by a behemoth shell with long, jutting barbs. In deck, the Empress gasps in surprise. What are you doing in a place like this? The immovable doesn't respond. She looks closer. A stream of drool trickles out of his gaping maw, and his gray eyes are rolled back. She then notices a cylindrical metal device, a little shorter than the average person, pierced into the base of his skull. Without a word, he stretches open his jaws, and a glow forms in his throat. The orange light of the breath attack screams out on the border between fire and plasma. The Empress bounds away from the entrance, the stairs of which are melted by the massive stream of heat. Byleth lands off to the side of the beast. I'm sorry, she apologizes to the saint. I don't know how long they've made you suffer, but I'm going to end it today. Felix aggressively swings towards Glenn. The elder brother deflects the blow, responding with a forward jab. Felix barely manages to swerve to the side of the attack, then blocking a side slash. Felix pushes back against the blade. The two are deadlocked as they stare down each other. You still have time to stand down, Felix. Don't make me my brother's killer, Glenn says. Don't be absurd. Someone's got to stop you, and it may as well be me. They step back, gaining enough distance to re-evaluate their stances. The brothers stand apart, sizing the other up. After a 5-second pause, the two dash towards each other. Their swords again clash in a fury of sparks as they mirror each other's movements. Felix swings upwards, and Glenn swings down. The blades ricochet with each violent attack, a catharsis for the countless years of their pent-up hostility. Again, the swords lock against each other. Glenn scolds, "You'll die knowing you're a disappointment to father, to mother, and to me. Is that what you want? I don't care what any of you think. Our family's backwards ideals disgust me," Felix spits. "I'd rather die cutting down you imperial scum than live as a fat, self-important bore." The two yet again separate, dashing backwards. "Is there nothing I can say to talk you out of this?" Glenn pants. "I'm sure I can convince Cornelia to be lenient after all our family's done for her over the years." Felix sneers, "So now you care about diplomacy? About reaching out to me? Whatever happened to putting down terrorist mongrels? And if you genuinely think that someone like Cornelia will ever be lenient, then you're a bigger idiot than I thought." Glenn sighs, "I can't save you from your own death wish." "Stole the words right out of my mouth," Felix shouts as he again charges for Glenn. The elder deflects the strike and kicks Felix in the stomach. The younger reels back, distancing himself to regain some air in his lungs. "It's not like you to play dirty," Felix taunts. "That's hardly playing dirty," Glenn returns. "Besides, my main objective is to stop you. The most I can grant you is challenging you myself." "Keep telling yourself you're being gracious," Felix scowls. "We both know this is really about you proving a point. At least I can admit why I'm here, to finally beat you." Felix once more rushes at Glenn. Their blades' collision results in another rain of embers as Glenn frowns down at his brother. "So that's what this is all about?" Glenn shouts, "Jealousy? You're doing this just because you want to beat me." "Not just because," Felix smirks as he presses against his older brother. "But it's icing on the cake." He shoves Glenn back, though he fails to truly push the older sword master off balance. Felix violently swings down as Glenn blocks. While Glenn's blade takes Felix's direct attack, the younger brother knees the older in the diaphragm. With a burst of adrenaline, Glenn pushes Felix back enough that he can cough and recover his breath. "You're losing your touch," Felix jeers. Glenn doesn't bother retorting as he sprints towards Felix. He justs his sword forward, which Felix catches with his blade. The younger brother then attempts to elbow Glenn in the face. The older brother, however, anticipates this and grabs the elbow in the palm of his hand. In the same swift movement, he stomps his boot down onto Felix's toes, hearing the crunch of the digits breaking. Felix hollers as he tries to slip out from under his foot, but Glenn uses the opportunity to jab his blade into Felix's torso. The younger brother manages to slip away just enough for Glenn's weapon to only penetrate into his lower external oblique. Glenn then kicks him back, sliding his blade out of his brother, and Felix stumbles to his knee, sputtering saliva. "It's over, Felix," Glenn commands. "Surrender, or I'll put you down here and now." "Fuck off," Felix seethes, clutching at his steaming wound. The door bursts open, its metal frame crinkling under a supernaturally strong force. Geralt bursts through, and just behind him, Ingrid along with the rest of the blade breakers. "Glenn! Felix!" she shouts. "Get away from him!" Ingrid sprints towards Glenn, swinging her relic. The sword master dodges backwards. With a sneer, he chides, "Of course you'd be here, too. It seems this damn war will take everything from me. We didn't belong to you in the first place." Ingrid retorts. "Stay out of this," Felix rasps. Ignoring his comment, she orders Geralt, "Get him out of here before he can do any more damage, and take him to a medic or a healer." The old mercenary nods as he single-handedly throws Felix over his shoulder and retreats, despite the younger man's protests. The two exit out of the hallway from whence Felix entered, now beset with the corpses of enforcers. "That was a mistake," Glenn admonishes. "You should have taken the traitor yourself and let the blade breaker fight me." "Trust me, Glenn," she frowns. "I'm more than enough to beat you. So you have something to prove, too, eh? Don't flatter yourself. I take no joy in this, she says. Well, then, wife, till death do us part. Glen charges at her. The haft of her relic stops his blade. Ingrid then sidesteps, letting him slip forward. She swings her lance at him, but he rolls under its point. He springs back to his feet and once again strikes at her. Ingrid strikes back, her relic cleaves through Glen's vibro sword, sending the top half of the blade flying. It's over, Glen, she insists. Not by a long shot, he barks. Glen swings the broken blade at her. Rather than jumping back or blocking like he was expecting, Ingrid dashes forward, just to the side of the snapped weapon. She brings the butt end of Lewin into his nose. Blood spurts out as his cartilage is crushed under the nigh indestructible bone of her weapon. The man stumbles back but then keeps persisting. He swings his shattered sword again. Ingrid counters by slicing Lewin downward. Its blade passes through his forearm, splitting it, and gashes his chest. His severed arm drops to the floor, weapon in hand, while steaming blood spills out. Glen screams as he tumbles backwards. He trips over himself and lands on his back. As he heaves in pain, Ingrid points the business end of her relic at his throat, and she looks down at the wound on his torso. Deep. But not deep enough that he'll die. Still, it'll ensure that he'll remain out of commission. Now it's over, Ingrid states. If you try to fight, you'll bleed out. And I'm not sure a diseased man with no sword arm will be of much use to the Empire. What happened to you? Glen breathes hard, blood smeared across his mouth and face. You used to be so sweet. So well-mannered. Was that all a lie? Or did your gratitude die with your modesty? My gratitude to you will be bringing you to one of our medics, Ingrid retorts. Don't worry. We don't treat our prisoners of war nearly as harshly as you do. Ingrid motions with her hand, and two members of her team lift the defeated swordmaster. A third member, the medic, meets with them, attending to Glen as they pull him out of the room. Leonie approaches Ingrid as she sighs and wipes her brow. Lucky we showed up when we did, the mercenary notes. It was certainly lucky for Felix, Ingrid agrees. At least that's one enemy commander down and out, Leonie says. What now? Ingrid answers, now we go find Sylvain. He sent me an SOS a couple minutes ago. Apparently, Catherine also went off on her own. The Golden Deer will be fine without Felix, but Shamir's group is outnumbered. Right then, Leonie nods. Let's go. Chapter 49, Chaos at the Capital. The Black Eagles rush through the main hall of the capital fortress. Edelgard bursts through a blockade of enforcers, shield first, without slowing down. As they climb back to their feet, Petra and Mercedes finish them off with their quick blades and blasts of magic. Blood seeps into the red carpet and stone tiles as Dedu and Casper clear Edelgard's flank. Their team rapidly progresses through the oversized hallway. All right. Nearly there, the blue-haired mercenary exclaims. Don't get overconfident, Edelgard chides. Cornelia will have the best protecting her. They come upon the garish double-door entrance to her chamber. The ornate two-story copper doors don't offer much in the way of defense, but they certainly reflect Cornelia's haughtiness. Still, Edelgard finds the lack of reinforced doors suspicious. Be on your guard, everyone, she instructs. As they force open the doors, they are greeted by Cornelia lounging on a throne. Surrounding the massive chamber are various defensive lines of enforcers. To the governor's left, Lieutenant Governor Rodrigue Frildarius stands in formation amongst the ranks. The man has long sapphire hair, much like Felix, but he wears an immaculate dark blue imperial officer's uniform, much like Glen. Welcome, one and all. Cornelia laughs. You made it this far. I say you deserve to die in an appropriately extravagant and poetic place. Flesh murmurs to her companions, she made herself an honest-to-goddess throne room. What the hell is she on? Governor Cornelia Arnhem, Edelgard declares, for your crimes against the people of Duskur, your own subjects, and the Bladdid family, I order you to stand down and submit yourself to the United Revolutionary Army. Oh, how cute. Cornelia sneers. She thinks she has the authority and power to act upon such childish whims. The governor snaps her fingers, why don't you start by beheading her in front of her friends? A red flash of light, and the Death Knight warps in. Again we meet. You will not escape the hunt this time. Emil. Mercedes shouts. How are you alive? Cornelia cackles. You really think I would execute such a valuable asset? I thought you and your team were supposed to be smart, Flame Emperor. Mercedes continues. Emil. It's me, Mercedes. Merci. Please, listen to me. Mercedes, the knight echoes. Emil does not wish to kill you, and neither do I. But you are in the way. If you face me, you will die like the rest. Emil, please, the doctor pleads. It's no use, Mercedes, Edelgard calls to her. He won't listen when he's like that. Edelgard, we can't fight him, she frowns. I don't wish to hurt him, either, but we'll have to do what we must to stop Cornelia. Cornelia crosses her legs from atop her throne. You're more than welcome to die trying. It's a shame that idiot mercenary boy isn't here to help kill you. I'd appreciate the extra security, but still. Honestly, dying against our forces will probably be the least painful way this will end for you. The immovable swings his tail down towards the Ashen Empress. She rolls away from the loud crash. She then launches fire into his rear hide to little effect. The flames flourish off his scales as he turns to her. His enormous maw opens as he looses a scream of fire at her. The beam pins her against the wall, melting the metal around her. Once he finishes the blast, she stumbles forward, her dark armor aglow with heat as steam rises from her figure. Damn it, she mutters as she brings herself to her feet. The dragon brings his colossal horned cranium down towards her. She dives to the side of the strike as he slaps into the heated metal, sending glowing steel outwards in a splash. Globs of the molten metal cling to the side of his face, but he doesn't react in the slightest. Indek then slams his forelegs forward, magically creating a small tsunami of water that emanates out in all directions. The Empress whips her sword into the wave, breaking down the section headed towards her. She next sprints towards the dragon as he slowly turns to her. Before he can fully face her, she slashes her sword against the side of his torso with all her might. She cleaves a nasty, albeit somewhat shallow, gash into his side. The creature screams as his green blood spurts out from the wound. He then strikes his adjacent foreleg into the Empress. The Ashen Empress bounces along the metal floor, struggling to find her footing until she rolls to a stop. As she stands, Indek prepares another blast of fire. She races forward, just dodging to the side of his shining beam. Rather than utilize another sword strike, Byleth keeps her momentum. She lunges towards the dragon and jumps. The Empress folds her arms in like a human battering ram as she does so, colliding with the side of the gargantuan being's face. A fang splits in his jaw, and he hollers as spittle and blood dribble out of his gaping mouth. Then, he reverses her momentum against her, swinging his head back round into her just as she regains her footing. This sends the Empress flying upwards. And as she falls back down, Indek launches a violent torrent of magic water into her. The artificial rapids slam into her, forcing her back up and juggling her till she crashes into the ceiling of the 5-story chamber. This lasts until he has to stop to recover his stamina, letting her fall. On her way back down, Byleth whips Lady at Midnight into a wall and uses it as a pendulum to slam into the dragon's face yet again. The cumbersome creature falls to its side as Byleth bounces off his hide. She then smashes into the floor and skitters across it. However, the Empress finds herself back on her feet sooner than the immovable, his bulky frame and mind control making it difficult for him to correct himself. The Ashen Empress uses the opportunity to summon thunder down on the device implanted at the base of his skull. The cylindrical apparatus shorts out and bursts apart in a flurry of sparks. Byleth huffs as she waits to see the results. For a moment, nothing happens. Then, his form shimmers white-green as it flakes away. In the dragon's place, she sees a horrifically emaciated and bruised man who appears to be the Nabatean equivalent of his late 30s or early 40s. His tangled emerald hair is long and greasy. His jawline is patched with stubble and unshaven hairs. Nothing covers him except some shredded prison rags. Byleth sprints up to Indek and takes him into her arms. He weakly stammers, "Suthies, is that you? I can feel you, but I can't see you." She hesitates to tell the truth, but ultimately replies in her synthesized voice, which he doesn't seem cognizant enough to notice the difference in tone. Yes. It's me. Ah. I was worried that. Indek goes silent just as his body goes limp in her arms. She sets him down to check his breathing and pulse. Nothing. All that time he spent suffering under their captivity, she grits her teeth. No one should have to suffer that fate. The Ashen Empress stands, resolved to get back to the others. Catherine swings Thunderbrand at Shay. He barely deflects the strike with his sword, dodging a second blow, then a third. I don't want to fight you, he says. Well, that's too bad, because I'm certainly going to kill you. Catherine slashes at him. What are you waiting for? Finish her off. Arvel's voice scolds. Shay parries one of Catherine's downward slashes, but she kicks him in the chest, knocking him back. I feel bad about killing her like this. I know that stuff like this is guaranteed in war, but something about this still feels off. Arvel. No response. Arvel? Useless. Must I handle everything myself? The voice is Arvel's but tainted with vitriol as though they're spitting upon him and Catherine. Suddenly, he feels his muscles surge with both power and pain. The fiery golden aura to which he's grown accustomed envelopes his body against his will. The strange markings and jagged halos return, along with his newly formed secondary blade. What the hell is this? Catherine squints from the light. Shay speaks, though now a child's condescending voice is layered atop his. It seems this vessel refuses to fully embrace the power of our shared wrath. No matter. He will adapt to his destiny in time. As for you, he points his secondary sword towards Catherine. You will make for some serviceable exercise before we kill the Fellstar's own twisted vessel. The hell are you talking about? Catherine barks. Oh right. You primitives know nothing about the truth of this world. Such is necessary for the paradise we've created, I suppose. The swordswoman sneers, I don't know what the fuck you are, but I'm killing you. She charges at him. Thunderbrand swings directly for the Flukel's face, but he vanishes just before the impact. A gust of wind blows Catherine's hair as he suddenly appears behind her. She swings back and he vanishes again, appearing in front of her. She strikes at him again, and his blades catch Thunderbrand. What are you? She glares. The Flukel answers in layered tones, the key to protecting paradise. He dashes back so fast it leaves an afterimage, causing Catherine to stumble forward. Gleaming energy swirls around his body as he smirks. Is that truly all the power the beast's remains can muster? He taunts. This foolish war will conclude sooner than I thought. I've had it with you. Catherine shouts as she rushes him again. Sparks fly as Thunderbrand clashes against the Flukel's blades. Surges of orange and gold flare from the rooftop with each countered strike, drawing the eyes of both revolutionary and imperial onlookers from below. Every time Catherine swings at him, he deflects. The whole while, his inhuman smirk never disappears. Her flurries become more desperate until the mercenary disappears altogether in a flourish of speed. He reappears behind her and lunges at her, but the swordswoman reacts just fast enough to strike back. One of his swords collides with Thunderbrand. The other rams itself through her stomach. She startles and gasps at the sudden injury. Still, Catherine doesn't lose her vigor. She again tries swinging Thunderbrand into the Flukel while she has him in range. Nonetheless, he repels the blade and drives his second sword through her chest. For a third time, she grits and attacks him with Thunderbrand. He kicks her and dashes back, pulling his weapons from her torso. Catherine stumbles back and falls to her knees. She jams Thunderbrand down into the ground and attempts to pull herself up. She only succeeds at planting one boot down, still stuck on her other knee. Go to hell, Catherine mutters, chest heaving as copious blood seeps through her white body armor. You'll get there first, the Flukel scoffs with inhuman voices. Greet that dead whelp for me when you've arrived. Her breath rags. She tastes iron. Her legs fail her before she can pull herself to her feet. Landing face first on the ground, Thunderbrand clangs beside her. Spittle flies from her mouth as she rages, trying to will her body to move as everything goes numb. Once the world starts fading, it finally becomes clear to her that she has no fight left. Shamir. Cyril. I'm sorry I couldn't finish this, Catherine's breath at last gives out. Ashes to ashes, his distorted voice says. Suddenly, Lady at Midnight whips into the ground beside him, startling him backwards. Poor choice of words, the Ashen Empress asserts as she lands. Consider your next actions carefully. I don't find myself particularly forgiving after what you've just done. How ominous, the Flukel mocks. In point of fact, you've merely saved me the trouble of hunting you down at a later time. In the name of this world, I will destroy you and everything that you represent, Fell Star. Your presence feels familiar, the Empress observes. You're the reason that boy became so different, aren't you? You're using him. It seems like consents, the Flukel notes. I suppose that's to be expected of a false deity, dead as she is. She doesn't recognize Edelgard's apparel. Her armor is lighter and sparser. Rather than her usual gold, she dons silver alongside her crimson. Even her hair and crown are different, less grandiose. By her side, Hubert stands with unusually shaggy hair. Then she sees Monica, the girl that should be dead. One by one, her black eagles gather round a conference table in a camp she does not remember. They each wear clothes she's never seen them wear. An almost maternal anger wells up within her as she sees a scar atop Casper's forehead from a severe injury she doesn't remember him receiving. Then it hits her. She's nowhere to be seen. Instead, the boy with the purple hair approaches the strategy meeting. He speaks with Edelgard and then the others. An indiscernible feeling hollows out her heart as her stomach sinks. Then a great sense of isolation overwhelms her as she suddenly feels alien at the sight of her own students. The world walls itself off from her as her place by Edelgard's side is suddenly gone, stolen or erased, she can't tell which. Even worse, she senses the absence of Ingrid. She isn't sure why, but she knows the Pegasus Knight is gone, passed on. Overwhelming hatred and regret course through her. It feels like a cold fire, freezing her from within. It's one of the only times in her life that she's felt her heart race. The world returns to Fhirdiad. The camp gives way to the rooftop, and this new Edelgard gives way to the enemy in front of her. She shakes her head, jaw clenched as tightly as when she witnessed Geralt's death. You're going to let that boy go, the Ashen Empress orders in her synthesized voice, and I'm going to destroy you. How heroic, for a monster. Still, how do you expect to annihilate me, but spare him, when my destiny is wound so tightly with this vessel's? We are bound one in the same. I'm not going to kill an innocent boy you've possessed, she retorts. My. A living weapon that does not wish to kill. Is that not your only value in this world? How interesting, indeed, to encounter a confused being such as yourself. Please inform me, what is so different between this Imperial and the others whom you so readily butcher? You're psychotic, the Empress spits. Spoken by the demon, of all beings, the Flukel shakes his head. No matter. I am no longer fond of this encounter. Die. The Flukel dashes towards the Ashen Empress in a burst of light. He leaves an afterimage as he does so, but despite his blinding speed, she still dodges. Just as he's passing by her, the Empress grabs the back of his collar and yanks him back, slamming him down into the ground. The roof cracks, and then she stomps on his torso, causing the section of the roof under them to give out entirely. Debris, piping, and stones scatter as they land in a hallway below. The Flukel rolls to his feet and swings his swords at Byleth. She reels under the glowing blades as they burn through the wall. I forgot myself, he derides. Naturally, you'd be slightly more of a bother than those pathetic relic wielders. He swings his blades at her, and she catches them with her own weapon. He tries to push her back, but she doesn't budge an inch. Come on, weak little human body, he grunts, trying to muster up his strength. The Empress' deep, synthetic voice resounds, consider yourself lucky that you have your human shield for now. It won't be long until I find out how to destroy you. The Ashen Empress kicks the Flukel in the chest at full force. His body ragdolls as it's sent flying through a relatively close window and falls 3 stories. When Shay finally regains consciousness, his awakened form is gone, and there's a cut on his forehead. Sighing, he wipes at the blood as he sits up and scans over the new environment, unsure of how much time has passed. What the hell happened, he grumbles to himself. Chapter 50, The Fall of Thirdyad. Sparks fly as the Death Knight's scythe screeches off of the Flame Emperor's shield. With each strike, she defends. Around them, her black eagles clash with Cornelia's troops. Petra, Casper, Flesh, and their respective squads fend off the larger number of enforcers. Didu's team combats Rodrigue and his company directly. Mercedes leads a smaller squad that simply defends itself, waiting to heal any of the injured party. Lastly, Cornelia sits on her throne, blasé. Edelgard thrusts her shield forward just as the knight strikes down, pushing him off balance. Again and again, she protects herself from his blows. After a scream of frustration, he barks, "I did not wait all this time for our reunion, only for you to hide behind that shield." "I don't have time to cater to what you want, Emil," she responds. "Do not call me that," he attacks her to the side. Instead of blocking, Edelgard swings her axe into the blade of his scythe. The deflected attack leaves the knight open, allowing Edelgard to lunge at him. She slams into him, shield first, and he grunts as he falls back. She lunges again and swings down her axe. It crashes into the stone floor as the knight rolls to the side. He quickly returns to his feet and observes, "You're faster than before." Edelgard scoffs, "You thought I would do nothing to improve since our last bout? I've been training, and I had my team construct a better suit." "What seems to be the matter, Emil? I thought you wished for me to fight back." That simply means you've become a proper challenge," he returns. Meanwhile, Didu and Rodrigue collide, their forces circling around them, embroiled in combat. Rodrigue's vibro lance scrapes off Didu's hollow shield. Didu then brings his vibro axe down onto Rodrigue's own hollow shield with a loud rumble. "I recognize you, boy," Rodrigue grunts out. "You were in the news some years back. Governor Arnim personally gave you a scholarship." "That is correct," Didu says. He strikes at Rodrigue again. The older man succeeds in blocking the blow, but not without stumbling back from the sheer force of the attack. Rodrigue continues, "Then why are you doing this?" "The governor made amends with your people." Didu grimaces, "Your forces slaughtered our people. So that's what this is about. That wicked girl has filled your head with thoughts of revenge." Rodrigue then jabs at Didu, who again blocks. "I watched your country's men kill my parents. I watched them chase down the last governor's son." At that, Didu swings his axe against Rodrigue's lance, nearly knocking it out of his hand. "I thought I understood Faergus' virtue of loyalty, but seeing you support Arnim after her betrayal of the last governor, I find myself confused once more." Rodrigue frowns, almost looking regretful. "It's true that the late governor's family was killed in that affair. Lambert was both my friend and my responsibility, yet I failed him." However, he charges at Didu, thrusting his lance repeatedly at the larger man. "My failure back then means that I must stop you here and now. I will not let the capital fall, and I will not fail another governor." Didu stops each jab with his shield, and he then repels Rodrigue's last strike by swinging his shield forward. Rodrigue stumbles back, and Didu takes the opening to swing for him again, with his axe this time. The lieutenant governor barely shields himself in time, being knocked to the ground. As he lands on his back, he desperately plunges his lance up towards Didu. With a sideways slash, Didu's axe, along with his raw power, cleaves the blade of the lance from the haft in a spray of cinders. He then brings his axe down onto Rodrigue's hollow shield with all his might. The blow violently severs the field of energy as the weapon digs itself straight through Rodrigue's chest with a crunch and buries into the stone beneath him. The lieutenant governor gapes at the steaming wound in his torso but says nothing, unable to find the words to suit his own demise. He merely stares at Didu, chest heaving, until his last breath gives, and his head slumps back onto the floor. "Good riddance," Didu says as he stands straight. The monolithic man wastes no time in returning to the rest of the fight, all while Rodrigue's troops scramble at the defeat of their leader. Some, overcome with a vengeful rage, charge at Didu with a spew of derogatory terms, only to be met with a swift and unforgiving axe. At her lackey's demise, Cornelia stands from her throne, mouth pulled down into a sociopathic frown. She channels her disappointment into a spell, summoning Death Gamma just in front of Didu. He sees the aura of darkness gather in front of him and attempts to jump back. The dark energy then assembles into a core and bursts outward, marring Dedu's heavy body armor and sending him flying. Cornelia prepares a second attack, only for a blast of fire to interrupt her spell. Dedu! Mercedes shouts as she bunches up her dress and rushes over to the unconscious man. The doctor begins performing a heal spell on Dedu, but Cornelia's face twists into a disgusted sneer as she readies a counter-attack. A bullet zips by her, barely slicing through her cheek and peach-colored hair. She quickly puts up a barrier spell, noticing that her attacker is flesh with a handgun. In the meantime, Edelgard continues her fight with the Death Knight. He slashes at her guard, testing for an opening. For her part, Edelgard struggles to get in close enough for a decisive blow. His reaction time and reach prevent her from opening up her defenses too much. That is, until she decides to charge at him. He sidesteps the charge and strikes at her backside. However, Edelgard plants her boot into the ground and pivots, swinging her shield into his oncoming scythe. The weapon ricochets away, and she prepares to bring her axe into his torso. Then, a magical image of a moon forms between the two. The illusion then transforms into a weakened simulation of a black hole that tears up the floor with swirls of dark magic. Edelgard turns to see the interrupter, finding Cornelia behind a barrier of blue magic. The madwoman's face is contorted into a twitching, smiling grimace as she launches fire at Edelgard. The Flame Emperor sprints away from the blast, dodging or deflecting each subsequent blast of magic. "Just die already, bitch!" Cornelia desperately screams. As Cornelia fires upon Edelgard, an orange arrow of energy flies through the massive open doorway and into the governor's energy field, cracking it. The Golden Deer then rush into the throne room with Claude in the lead. Cornelia's cheeks spasm as she sneers. "Well then," she seethes, "that's my cue to leave." She attempts to use a warp spell to teleport away, but Marianne summons silence around her. The field of light runes surrounds Cornelia, dissipating both her barrier and the magic that had been forming into warp. Cornelia stares for a brief second in a panic, then she runs. Her heels only clack away for a few seconds until Claude fires a bolt from Failnaught which pierces through the governor's thigh. She tumbles forward, landing face first into the carpet surrounding her throne. Cornelia clutches at the steaming wound in her leg, swearing in an ancient consonant-filled language they don't understand. Edelgard turns to face the Death Knight again, only to discover his absence. Figures, she thinks. He's probably upset that Cornelia ruined his hunt. When Cornelia's limb finally numbs, and her cursing subsides, she looks up from the floor. Edelgard and Claude stand over her. "This is rather undignified," Claude quips. "Cornelia Arnhem," Edelgard booms. "Or rather whatever your true Agarthan moniker is, you are hereby under arrest for your numerous crimes against your subjects, treason against Lambert Bladded and his family, and finally, for your genocide of Duscur and her people. Just kill me and be done with it," Cornelia spits. "Yeah," Claude chuckles, "you're not getting out of this that easy." Glenn wakes in the medical wing of the Capitol Fortress. He scans around him, noting that there are numerous revolutionaries receiving medical treatment, but no other Imperials are to be seen. A phantom pain surges through his sword arm. He glances down at the bandages wrapped around the stump of his forearm and glowers. His patched-up broken nose also makes it a bit more difficult to breathe properly. "Oh joy, you're awake," he hears Sylvain sigh. He looks to see Ingrid and Sylvain approach him from across the room. "Where's my men?" he demands. "Not here," Ingrid answers. "Imperial prisoners are receiving medical treatment in the dungeons. Our forces have priority in the medical wing. You're only here as a courtesy." "How generous," Glenn frowns. "You're both here, but I don't see Felix. Too grumpy that he lost to me to rub our defeat in my face." They both ignore the captured swordmaster. Instead, Ingrid responds, "You're very fortunate we managed to take you in alive. This was the bloodiest conflict we've seen yet." "I'm sure," he glares. "So, it's over then. What of father?" Ingrid and Sylvain exchange knowing looks. "I'm sorry, Glenn," Ingrid says. "I see," his jaw clenches. "And mother?" "She's fine," Ingrid answers. "Unlike the Empire, we're not in the habit of executing our high-profile enemies or their relatives just to prove a point. The battle's over. She's free and alive." Being monitored for security reasons, but alive. If you're watching her, is she truly free? Glenn retorts. It's the best we can manage. Your family has a terrible habit of being relentlessly loyal to the wrong people. You're one to talk, he sneers. Perhaps, but that's why I owe it to these people to fight against Nemesis now, she says. A pungent silence settles over them for a few seconds. Then Glenn turns to Sylvain. All this self-righteousness and you don't even know, do you? Glenn asks. Sylvain sighs, all right, I'll bite. Know what? What happened to your brother? That demon you have with you, it killed him. We found Miquelon on the pavement by an apartment complex he was assigned to investigate. The only way we could tell it was him was because of his ID. That's why the funeral was closed casket. The rest of his team fared no better. None of their loved ones got the dignity of open casket services. You can call us corrupt all you want, but that's the sort of monster you're working with. What do you think is going to happen to Fodlan once the Flame Emperor is in charge? What do you think she's going to do our people? What do you think she'll have her pet monster do to those who challenge her authority? Even if you're right about Nemesis and the Empire, what then? You're just going to trade one fascist for another? Siding with her was a mistake. You're only helping a power-hungry, narcissistic madwoman and her inhuman weapon conquer the world. Sylvain grimaces at his speech, but he takes a breath and responds, if you really believe that about Edelgard, then you're too far gone in your own preconceived opinion of her. None of us are going to pretend that war is a pretty business that we're going to walk away with our hands clean. But we have to do something. As for Miquelon, I don't know the circumstances. Maybe he had it coming, maybe he didn't. But he wasn't exactly a swell guy, which I've told you numerous times. Yeah, it's difficult to hear that one of our friends is the one who killed him, but that doesn't stop what we have to do. Ingrid nods, Sylvain's right. There will be no shortage of people like you who look down on us while protecting leaders who commit genocide or sell off children. You can project onto Edelgard all you want. That won't stop us. She begins to leave, but she turns one final time to say, oh, and Glenn. I'm using my newfound legal authority to annul our marriage. We're done. As Ingrid vacates the medical wing, Edelgard stops her in the halls. Ah, Ingrid. How did your talk with Glenn fare? Better than I expected. I think the meds have mellowed him a little, she dryly chuckles. I suppose that's the best we can hope for. Anyway, I have something to say regarding our hold on Faerghus. Ingrid nods, I suppose you'll want to make some sort of statement to the public. In due time, Edelgard answers. If I immediately announce our claim on the territory, that risks a javelin strike upon all of us in the capital. I think it's best to wait, therefore they won't waste the resource on the attack if they're unsure whether or not we're on the premises. Ah, right. However, Edelgard continues, I did not come here to discuss a possible counterattack. I came because I need someone I can trust in charge of Faerghus territory. Ingrid's eyes widen, wait, you can't mean me? Edelgard explains, only if you want the position. Let's face facts. You're the most qualified amongst our ranks. I know this is sudden, and perhaps it will cause a bit of whiplash since I had just promoted you to account already. Yet, Okay, Ingrid interrupts. I'll do it. I think Felix was technically next in line, but I'd say his interests lie elsewhere. Besides, putting the next person in line in a position of authority, simply because they're next, would go against what you're fighting for, wouldn't it? Edelgard grins, that it would, my friend. Thank you for accepting. Truthfully, it's a relief to hear. Ingrid returns her smile, I'm glad I could help. But don't count me out of the war just because of my new job. I'll bear that in mind, Edelgard says. Still, you'll be most useful to the war effort if you maintain control over Faerghus. Shay walks down a road to the next town over. He has a hoodie pulled over his uniform, and he fidgets with his hands in his pockets. Arvel, what the hell was that? I do not know, their panicked voice answers. One moment, we were set upon by that woman with the curious weapon. Then abruptly, a great and terrible agony coursed through my head. All I recall afterwards is regaining consciousness alongside you. Do you, perchance, remember anything of the encounter? Arvel asks. Not much, Shay shakes his head. You stopped responding to me for a second, but then I heard your voice again. You were mean. Well, meaner than Yusu. I am not mean. I merely reprimand you for your mistakes the way any responsible partner would. Whatever. Then my body started to ache all over. I could feel your power, but it was different, overwhelming. It hurt this time. Then nothing. A few flashes of that woman, and then I remember seeing the Ashen Demon. But I'm not sure if that was real or a dream. Then I woke up on the ground, back to normal. You heard my voice, but it wasn't me. What could that portend? Are you sure you aren't just trying to secretly mind control me? Don't be absurd. I would never commit a crime so barbaric. Yet, that does beg the question. What are we? Or rather, what am I? There's something inside us capable of this great power, but it seems to have a mind of its own. Are you saying we aren't alone? That may be possible, loath as I am to admit it. Be prepared for anything. But above all, bear in mind our true objective, kill the Ashen Demon before they, and whatever is inside us, can wreak any more havoc. Check the description for the links to the author.